Chapter 1171. In the spacious square, the white jade floor was emitting a faint light. That young man stood straight with a smile on his face. His tone was casual, slightly dragging out the end of his words, which made him look especially lazy. If one only looked at his current expression, one would think that he was gently whispering something. Who would have thought that he was ruthlessly stepping on another person under his feet? Arrogant. Arrogant. Bold. Everyone who saw this scene could not help but have such thoughts in their hearts. This young man looked docile and harmless, but in fact, he was not to be trifled with. Lu Yintong never thought that even after she had sternly warned him, the other party still did not take it seriously. He even publicly humiliated Lu Ziyin. This foot seemed to be stepping on Lu Ziyin, but in fact, it was targeted at her. She was so angry that her chest violently heaved up and down. She could not help but raise her voice and become a little sharp. Chu Yu. In the academy, you better restrain yourself. After confirming that Lu Ziyin's hand bones were almost broken, Chu Luyue lifted his foot. Lu Ziyin was in so much pain that he could not shout. He could only curl up on the ground and tremble violently. He could not describe the feeling just now. Chu Yu, he really wanted to kill him. Moreover, for some unknown reason, this person had an indescribable aura that made people not dare to underestimate him. In fact, when he restrained his expression, people would unconsciously submit to him. He had been stepped on without being able to struggle and resist. On one hand, it was because he was injured. On the other hand, it was because of Chu Yu's astonishing aura. Chu Luyue glanced at Lu Ziyin and retracted his gaze with satisfaction. He smiled and said, "Senior Lu, I don't understand what you're saying. I've only been in the academy for 11 days, and I was even locked in Pingmin Mountain for 10 days. How can I not know how to restrain myself?" You, Lu Yintong gritted her teeth. This Chu Yu was not only arrogant and impudent, he was also sharp-tongued. Lu Ziyin only came to exchange pointers with you, and you put him in such a situation. I don't know Lu Ziyin. It's strange that he suddenly came to find me, isn't it? Not to mention, in order to exchange pointers with me, he purposely waited at my residence for a long time. Chu Liyue's smile deepened as she said meaningfully. I really don't know what kind of power I, a new student who just entered the academy, have to make senior brother Lu so stubborn just to fight with me. Everyone turned to look at Lu Yintong. In fact, Chu Liyue's words were already very clear. Lu Ziyin purposely found trouble with her because of Lu Yintong's instructions. As for the reason, it was naturally because she had lost to a new junior brother on Thousand Wine Mountain. In any case, he was still a genius ranked high on the Azure Sky rankings. Coupled with the fact that he was used to acting ostentatiously, it was inevitable that he would be arrogant and willful. How could Lu Yintong let this go? It was actually very understandable for him to do such a thing. However, she did not expect that the final outcome would be like this. Not only did Lu Ziyin fail to teach Chu Luyue a lesson, but she also made her lose face. The way some people looked at Lu Yintong gradually changed. He took the initiative to compete with others, but he was not convinced after losing. He even deliberately used such methods to bully others behind their backs. Wasn't he too narrow-minded? She only dared to bully Chu Yu because he was a new student and did not have any background. If it was someone stronger than her or someone with a strong background, she would definitely have a different reaction. Lu Yintong felt as if there was a blade at her back. The surrounding people's gazes made her feel extremely pressured. She could not stay any longer and finally could not help but sneer. So, now you admit that you're deliberately taking revenge. Chu Luyue smiled faintly. Senior Sister Lu, you're exaggerating when you say that I'm taking revenge. I'm just an ordinary student. I came to Lingshao College just to improve my cultivation. I don't have any other intentions. It's just that if people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people offend me, I can't be a pushover. Don't you think so? Lu Yintong clenched her teeth. This time, seeing that senior sister Lu is here personally, I'll let it go. Chu Luyue glanced at Lu Zi and who was lying on the ground. Senior brother Lu, when you go back, you must recuperate well. When I'm free, I'll visit you again. Lu Zi shuddered. He did not need Chu Ning to visit him. He did not want to see this person again in the future. He stood up with difficulty and limped away. Originally, his body had suffered heavy injuries, so he couldn't stand up. However, probably because he wanted to get away from Chu Luyue too much, he gritted his teeth and held on. When he walked to Lu Yintong, he lowered his head in shame. Lu Yintong gave him an extremely cold warning look and reprimanded him in a very low voice. Useless thing. Lu Ziyan's body stiffened and his head lowered even more. Needless to say, his life at Lu Yintong's place would not be easy in the future. Lu Yintong suddenly took a step forward. He's no match for you. Then, what about me? Everyone quieted down. Lu Yintong was going to fight with Chu Yu. Many people, including Zhong Sun, were worried. Even if Chu Yu could defeat Lu Ziyan, he was definitely not Lu Yintong's opponent now. If the two of them really fought, Chu Yu was afraid. Just as Chu Luyue was thinking about how to answer, a familiar voice suddenly came from the side. Lu Yintong, isn't it a little shameful for you to fight with a junior who just came to the academy? Chapter 1172. Even if Lu Yintong didn't look for her, she would still go to her. She had finally won the bet, so she couldn't give up. Lu Yintong's face turned pale. Of course I didn't. Going to Thousand Wine Mountain for a month and asking for the best spot, to her, this was not something that could be easily accomplished. She thought that Chu Yu would be more restrained after being locked up in Min Mountain. She didn't expect him to be even more reckless. Then I'll have to trouble senior sister Lu to send me to the top of Thousand Wine Mountain every day for the next month. Chu Liyue's next sentence made Lu Yintong even angrier. What did you say? You want me to send you there personally? Senior sister Lu, why are you so surprised? Chu Luyue raised his eyebrows slightly. I only said that because I heard that the spot isn't fixed and we have to go there every day. If senior sister Lu doesn't go with me, how can I get the spot next to the spring? Don't you think so? Lu Yintong's chest heaved up and down violently. Senior sister Lu, the bet is set. Are you not willing? Chu Luyue seemed to have noticed something and asked carefully. Lu Yintong was so angry that she laughed. Okay. Since you said so, I'll accompany you to the end. Don't you want to go to Thousand Wine Mountain? I'll go with you every day for the next month. She wanted to see what kind of tricks this Chu Yu could still play. Lu Yintong turned around and left angrily. Her footsteps were much faster than before. The crowd quickly made way for her. After Lu Yintong's figure disappeared, many people turned around and looked at Chu Luyue with admiration. TSK. Could it be that this Chu Yu really went all out? From now on, he had completely fallen out with Lu Yintong, right? He was really courageous. Chu Luyue didn't seem to notice those people's gazes. He tidied his clothes and walked down from the square. Zhong Sun quickly walked up to him. Junior brother Chu Yu, seeing his slightly worried face, Chu Luyue smiled and comforted him. Senior brother Zhong Sun, don't worry. I know what to do. Looking at the young man's firm and indifferent eyes, Zhong Sun suddenly felt that he seemed to be much more mature and calm than he had imagined. Even she couldn't guess what he was thinking. He could only nod. Anyway, she was the one who started it, so you can't be blamed for it. Moreover, if she really wants to do something, Elder Wanjing probably won't agree to it. As the only disciple that Elder Wanjing had accepted in the past few years, even an idiot would know that Elder Wanjing would definitely dote on him and would not allow him to be bullied. At this moment, another voice came from the side. Your boxing is not bad. Chu Luyue and Zhong Sun turned around to look, and saw that Luo Yanlin and the others had unknowingly arrived. It was Luo Yanlin who spoke. He looked at Chu Luyue from head to toe, and his eyes flashed. Early stage 7th order. Your strength doesn't seem like it. Chu Luyue smiled and chose a euphemistic way of saying it. I'm more durable. That was true. After fighting with those puppets, her resistance might not even be comparable to a 8th order warrior, let alone someone of the same level. Of course, it was the same when fighting others. Every punch hit the flesh. It was all thanks to Dabao that she was able to win this match so easily today. Thinking of this, Chu Luyue suddenly frowned. Dabao said that he would wait for her in the academy, but there was no movement until now. She didn't know if he was in the academy now, or why he hadn't come to find her. Chu Yu, what's wrong with you? Seeing that Chu Luyue was a little absent-minded, Luo Shishir couldn't help but ask. Chu Luyue came back to her senses and shook her head. Nothing, just a sudden fight, and I'm a little tired. Everyone, you've been winning from the beginning to the end, and you didn't suffer any injuries, so why are you tired? Luo Yanlin suddenly said. You seem to be quite talented in martial arts. If you have time, ask the elders and cultivate well, maybe it's not bad. If this Chu Yu was really only at the early stage of the 7th order, then the fact that he could defeat Lu Ziyan so easily was enough to prove his talent. Even if his current realm wasn't high, but in the future. Maybe it was limitless. Chu Liuyue's lips curled up slightly. Thank you for your advice, Senior Brother Luo. In addition, today's matter can be considered as owing Senior Brother Luo a favor. If there is a chance in the future, Chu Yu will definitely repay it. Luo Yanlin admired Chu Luyue even more in his heart. The reason why he spoke was not entirely to help Chu Yu. But the other party took the initiative to accept his favor, which was indeed smart and righteous. It's just a matter of a sentence, I don't need you to repay anything. After all, you are Shishir's friend, so this small matter is not worth mentioning. In the future, cultivate well and get on the Azure Cloud list as soon as possible, then you won't be bullied like this. Chu Liuyue's expression was slightly restrained as she nodded seriously. Alright, since this matter is over, you all should go back and have a good rest, Chu Yu. Before Luo Yanlin could finish, a voice suddenly came from behind. The few of them turned their heads and saw the door of the Donghuang Bell Tower suddenly open, and Elder Wanjing was walking out. He walked over and stopped in front of the few of them for a moment. The few of them bowed in unison. Greetings, Elder Wanjing. Chu Luyue quickly glanced at his expression. Master. Follow me. Elder Wanjing's face was expressionless, and no one could tell what he was thinking. He only said this sentence and walked forward. The few of them looked at each other. Why do I feel like something is wrong with Elder Wanjing? Luo Shishir muttered. It's not just a feeling, it's true. Zhuoxing's tone was firm, but his face was full of confusion. Strange. Chu Yu, logically speaking, your master, Elder Wanjing, should be very proud and happy that you won this challenge so beautifully. Why? He couldn't explain it, but it was strange. It didn't seem like he was happy or angry, and it was hard to fathom. Chu Luyue shook his head. I'll go first, I'll find you later. With that, he followed. Zhong Sun wanted to follow, but he stopped when he remembered Elder Wanjing's expression. Chu Luyue followed Elder Wanjing back to his residence. This was Chu Liuyue's first time coming to ancient Cypress Mountain. She was supposed to formally acknowledge him as her master on the second day after the examination, but something happened at Thousand Wine Mountain that night, and she was directly locked up in Pengmin Mountain, so she couldn't come. The mountain was lush with green trees, and the faint fragrance of herbs filled the air. In the academy, every elder's residence was independent, so there were only the two of them on the mountain. Halfway up the mountain, in a herb field, there was a simple wooden house. The two of them walked into the house, and Elder Wanjing finally stood still and turned around. He looked at Chu Luiyue quietly, and there was a sharp and cold light in his calmness. It was as if he wanted to see through her completely. Chu Luiyue's heart slowly tightened. Elder Wanjing stared at her and asked word by word, "Who taught you your boxing skills?" Love Network asked. "Who taught you your boxing skills?" If you lack any herbs, just use your points to exchange for them at the Medicine Wind Valley. Chu Luiyue took it with both hands. "Thank you, Master." Elder Wanjing nodded and asked again. "By the way, how were you in Pengmin Mountain for the past few days? How was it?" Love Network has a better reading experience. Not only would he be able to hold his head high and take her down a notch, but he would also be able to pull her to the front when there was an unexpected situation. Why wouldn't he do it? Zhong Sun's expression changed slightly, and then he slowly raised his thumb. "You are ruthless enough." After today's incident, everyone thought that Chuyu did this to take revenge on Lu Yintong. However, Chuyu was actually doing it for Myriad Wine Mountain. From the beginning to the end, his goal was never Lu Yintong. However, no matter what, Lu Yintong is still an extremely powerful genius on the Ascension rankings. I heard that she has been diligently cultivating a martial technique recently, wanting to break through her own strength. If she really succeeds, then, charging into the top 40 isn't impossible. At that time, Chu Luiyue stood still, tilted his head, and asked with interest. "Is the top 40 very powerful?" Zhong Sun was stunned. Seeing the casual look of the youth opposite him, his heart skipped a beat, and he subconsciously thought that the other party was comparing Lu Yintong to Luo Yanlin. The top 40 is quite powerful. Of course, compared to Luo Yanlin, it's still a lot worse. But Chu Yu, you also know that relying on others is ultimately better than relying on yourself, right? Luo Yanlin could help once, but he couldn't help every time, right? Chu Luiyue pressed a hand on the door and was about to open it when he suddenly stopped. "Thank you, senior brother Zhong Sun." She turned around and said seriously. Zhong Sun relaxed a little and smiled. "Anyway, it's fine as long as you know what you're doing. With your talent, it won't be long before you can enter the Ascension rankings. It's not impossible for you to catch up in the future. Junior brother has been busy for so long, it's time for you to have a good rest. I won't disturb you anymore." Chu Luiyue nodded slightly. Zhong Sun quickly left. Chu Luiyue pushed the door and entered. She carefully locked the door. Click. "Your troublemaking personality really hasn't changed at all." A cold but soft voice came from behind. Although the tone was as cold and dignified as possible, it was a pity that the voice was too childish, and it sounded especially out of character. Instead, it made people want to rush up and ravage him, mess up his hair, and pinch his little face. Chu Luiyue held back her laughter and turned around. In the room, who was sitting upright and obediently, if it wasn't Dugu Maobao who she hadn't seen for a long time. Today, he was still wearing the same purple brocade clothes, and his chubby and fair little face was no different from before. Chu Luiyue's hand suddenly felt a little itchy. Then, she met Dugu Maobao's pair of magnificent and bewitching eyes. The two of them looked at each other for a moment. Dugu Maobao seemed to have seen through her thoughts, and his expression gradually became dangerous. A faint chill spread out from his body. For a moment, she couldn't refute, her cultivation experience was indeed different from that of ordinary people. "Maybe I'm fated with Pengmin Mountain?" she muttered in a low voice. To be precise, she was fated with the space behind that door. She had chosen the same thing twice in a row. If she went there again, would she still choose the same thing? As soon as this dangerous thought appeared, Chu Luyue forcibly suppressed it. She came to the academy to cultivate diligently, not to cause trouble. You're about to break through to the middle of the 7th level. Dugu Mabao looked at her again. Chu Luyue laughed. Yes. I thought that it might not be so fast, but I didn't expect that after cultivating in Pingmin Mountain for 10 days, my progress would be so fast. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before she could officially break through. Dugu Mabao waved his small hand, and a chessboard with a faint glow appeared between the two. In that case, let's continue the game from last time. This time, Chu Luyue took the most steps ever since she played chess with Dugu Mabao. Of course, in the end, she was still exhausted and almost exhausted. However, perhaps because he knew that she had experienced a lot today, Dugu Mabao quickly let her go. Looking at the completely dark sky outside, Debao stood up and flew down from the chair. Chu Luyue asked in surprise. Debao, you're leaving. Dugu Mabao didn't look back and nodded slightly. You just have to stay here and cultivate properly. Where are you going? At this point, Chu Luyue suddenly remembered that she hadn't asked him where he had been all this time. If he was also in the academy, then, I have a place to go. Dugu Mabao's answer was extremely simple, and it was obvious that he had no intention of continuing. This time tomorrow, I'll be here again. Chu Luyue hurriedly called out to him, Hey, Debao. I won't be here at this time tomorrow. Dugu Mabao turned around and frowned. What do you mean? Actually, I'll be going out later. For the next month, I won't be staying here at night. Dugu Mabao suddenly understood something, and his devilish purple eyes narrowed dangerously. You are going to Thousand Wine Mountain. Chu Luyue nodded honestly. It wasn't easy to win the bet, of course I can't give it up. She had already offended Lu Yintong, wouldn't it be a great loss if she didn't go? Dugu Mabao snorted coldly. Or is it because of that red-tailed phoenix? As soon as he finished speaking, Dumpling ran out and squatted on Chu Luyue's shoulder. It shook its wings and nodded vigorously with a face full of pride. Of course. Dugu Mabao looked at it coldly. Even if you don't go, as your strength increases, the bloodline in its body will gradually be stimulated. Chu Luyue wasn't surprised that Dugu Mabao knew about this. She shrugged and smiled. I know, but since I have this opportunity, I don't want to give it up. She really didn't know how she was going to endure the next month. However, she had already made a promise in front of so many people. If she went back on her word, her reputation in the academy would be ruined. Therefore, no matter how uncomfortable it was, she had to continue. She took a deep breath and looked at the top of the mountain. When she saw the faces of those people, her expression changed slightly. Why are they here today? When Chu Luyue saw her expression, an idea popped up in her mind. She also looked over and quickly sized up the few people. There were men and women, and they were all dressed in luxurious clothes. They seemed to be the children of aristocratic families. Most importantly, the aura around those people was not much weaker than Lu Yintong's. Moreover, judging from Lu Yintong's expression, those people might be stronger than her. Senior Lu, is there a problem? Chu Luyue asked gently. Lu Yintong slowly clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. He still has the nerve to ask. But at this moment, she had no choice but to bite the bullet and continue. She turned her head, lowered her voice, and said word by word, 1 month later, we'll settle this score properly. The threat and warning in her words were undisguised. Chu Luyue's face showed a trace of guilt. Originally, I thought that if Senior Lu felt that it was difficult, then I would temporarily forget about today. But since Senior Lu said that there's no problem, then I will naturally accept. As she said that, the corners of her lips curled up slightly. Senior Lu, you're a woman of your word. You're really a role model for our generation. Chu Luiyue didn't lower her voice when she said these two sentences, so quite a few people around her heard them clearly. For a moment, the atmosphere became strange. Lu Yintong didn't expect that she would dare to play such a trick in front of so many people. Her expression almost collapsed. You, Tong. Just as Lu Yintong was about to explode, Gongxing suddenly spoke, pulling her back to her senses. We still have other things to do later. Let's deal with junior brother Chu Yu's problem as soon as possible. Otherwise, junior brother Chu Yu will suspect that you forgot again. As Gongxing spoke, he looked meaningfully at Chu Luiyue. Although he was smiling, his words were filled with undisguised sarcasm. He wasn't present during the day, but he had heard everything from Lu Yintong. Although he was shocked that a rank 7 warrior like Chu Luiyue was able to defeat Lu Zian, who was an entire rank higher, he still felt contempt and disdain for Chu Luiyue. In his opinion, there was a problem with Chu Luiyue's victory. He must have used some underhanded method. In addition, he later asked Lu Yintong to send him tens of thousands of wine mountains for a month. In his heart, he hated Chu Luiyue even more. Chu Luiyue didn't care about this at all. No matter what they said, as long as what needed to be done was done, nothing else mattered. Thus, she replied with a smile, Senior brother Gongxing is right. My memory has always been bad. In the next month, I hope that senior sister Lu will forgive me. Lu Yintong's chest seemed to have a ball of flame surging crazily, almost burning her to ashes. Without saying a word, she lifted her foot and walked up. Gongxing followed closely behind. When he passed by Chu Luiyue, he stopped in his tracks and looked sideways at Chu Luiyue deeply. You have guts. He still had a smile on his face, but the words that came out of his mouth were cold and sinister, making people shudder. Chu Luiyue chuckled, Thank you for your praise, senior brother Gongxing. Gongxing took a deep breath, turned around, and quickly followed Lu Yintong. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows and slowly walked over. Lu Yintong came to the spring at the top of the mountain. The few people who were already standing there heard the commotion and turned their heads to look. Lu Yintong stood still, took a deep breath, and said politely, Liang Xiao, is there another seat here? No. A delicately dressed woman interrupted her and said lazily, That's right. There's already someone here. He should be here soon. If you want to come, you should come early tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1177. Liang Xiao was very direct. Obviously, she did not intend to give Lu Yintong any face. This was because she was ranked 39th on the warrior leaderboard. Much higher than Lu Yintong. One had to know that the competition on the Qingyun leaderboard was very fierce. Every time one moved up a rank, it meant that one's strength was much stronger than the previous one. Lu Yintong naturally did not dare to offend Liang Xiao. Of course, there was another reason. Liang Xiao was born in a first-rate family, much more powerful than Lu Yintong's second-rate family background. Even though everyone in the academy rarely talked about this matter, it didn't mean that they could really ignore this matter. After all, they would not stay in the academy forever. In the future, when they left the academy, they would have to face these problems if they wanted to survive in the realm of God. If he offended someone with a strong background here, his future days would not be easy. Therefore, the arrogant Lu Yintong did not get angry when she was given the cold shoulder. In fact, the expression on her face became even more courteous. I wonder who that person is. I can use points to exchange with him. Liang Xiao seemed to have heard a joke. She suddenly covered her mouth and laughed. Points. Do we look like people who lack those things? Her tone was light as if she was teasing, but to Lu Yintong, it was very harsh. It was not that Liang Xiaoxiao and the others did not lack points. In Lingxiao College, the importance of points was self-evident. No one would complain about having more points. But relatively speaking, they did not need to exchange such things for points. It was embarrassing. These words were indeed mocking Lu Yintong. Lu Yintong was also in a dilemma. Who would have thought that she would meet this group of people on the first day? Normally, they wouldn't come here, but for some reason, they actually came together today. Moreover, they took all the seats and did not give her any chance at all. She did not want to offend these people, but there was still the aggressive Chuyu behind her. Just as Lu Yintong was thinking about how to speak again, Yang Xiaoxiao's eyes lit up and she waved behind Lu Yintong. Ziyuan. Come quickly. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Hearing this, everyone present turned to look at him. Lu Yintong's heart skipped a beat, and she quickly turned around. When she saw who it was, her face turned ugly. Jiang Jiwan. The person that Liang Xiaoxiao said didn't come was her. Jiang Ziyuan's movements were light as she floated down. Under the moonlight, there was a sense of ethereal immortality. The crowd was silent for a moment, and many people's eyes flashed with surprise. Jiang Jiwan didn't seem to notice these gazes at all. She walked straight towards them and said with a faint smile, "I'm sorry for being late." Lu Yintong was secretly angry and turned to leave. But after taking a few steps, she was stopped by someone. "Senior Sister Lu, where are you going?" Chu Luyue stood in front of her and raised an arm to block her way. "You haven't fulfilled your promise to me yet." Lu Yintong was very annoyed. "Let's call it a day. We'll talk about it tomorrow." With that, she was about to force her way out. However, Chu Luyue held her back tightly and didn't give her a chance to move forward. "Senior Sister Lu, I'm really sorry. I don't want to wait until tomorrow. If you continue to push it to the day after tomorrow, then the day after tomorrow. What's the point of this bet?" Lu Yintong gritted her teeth. "I said tomorrow." Chu Liyue's eyes moved back and forth between her and Jiang Jiwan. It seemed that the two of them had a deep grudge. She didn't expect to meet them so directly today. There were several people on the other side and they seemed to be very confident. No wonder Lu Yintong wanted to leave. If she stayed, wouldn't she be humiliated for nothing? However, Chu Luyue didn't intend to care about this. She only wanted Lu Yintong to fulfill her promise. "Senior Sister Lu, I also said that I don't want to wait until tomorrow." Chu Liyue's tone became more serious. At this moment, Liang Xiaoxiao's coquettish laughter suddenly sounded. "Hey, Lu Yintong, have you fallen to the point where you're threatened by junior brother? I remember how glorious it was when you confessed to senior brother Rongxiu in public. How did it end up like this?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1178. Liang Xiaoxiao. Lu Yintong was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Her hair stood on end and she could no longer hold it in. She let out a sharp cry. "Don't forget that I'm still your senior sister. Show some respect." "Senior sister." Liang Xiaoxiao's smile blossomed. "You entered the academy half a year earlier than us, but your strength is far behind our senior sister." Her words were full of sarcasm. Lu Yintong's face was red with anger. There seemed to be flames burning in her eyes. "These people, they're too much." Chu Luyue raised his eyebrows slightly. "Confess, in public." It seems like Rongxiu is quite popular in the academy. No wonder the atmosphere between Lu Yintong and Jiang Jiwan is so strange. When rivals meet, their eyes will be exceptionally red. They must have fought several times in public and in secret. However, Lu Yintong was obviously at a disadvantage now. The other party had the advantage in numbers and was stronger than her. It was normal for her to be humiliated like this. Xiao Xiao. Jiang Jiwon spoke, as if she wanted to make peace. That's all in the past. Why bring it up again? Anyway, the person standing next to Rong Xiao was not either of them. Jiang Jiwon had long known that there were countless people in the academy who had a crush on Rong Xiao. If she were to target each and every one of them, she would have been exhausted. The reason why she was in such a mess with Lu Yintong was because the bird that stuck its head out would be shot. There were so many people who liked Rong Xiao, but most of them did not even dare to say a word to him. However, Lu Yintong confessed to Rong Xiao in public. This matter was so big that Jiang Jiwon had been brooding over it. Although Rong Xiao did not even look at Lu Yintong at that time, it had happened. Jiang Jiwon could not get over it. What was even more ridiculous was that Rong Xiao had said something to Lu Yintong. He said he already had someone he liked. These words were not only for Lu Yintong, but also for the other girls in the academy who were ready to make a move. After Lu Yintong found out, she thought it was Jiang Jiwon, so she went to Jiang Jiwon's place to make a fuss. Thus, the two of them became enemies. Even after Rong Xiao left the academy, there was still a deep gap between the two of them. Every time they met, they would fall into this kind of awkward situation. It was fine at first, but as time passed, Jiang Jiwon caught up and gradually surpassed Lu Yintong. Because of the rumors about her relationship with Rong Xiao, many people in the academy wanted to befriend her. Jiang Jiwon's strength had increased greatly, and she had expanded her network. She quickly crushed Lu Yintong. As a result, Lu Yintong's days in the academy gradually became difficult. Chapter 1179. There was dead silence. Because of this sudden commotion, the originally lively mountain became cold and silent. Many people looked at each other with different expressions. The words that Jiang Jiwon said just now. There was too much information. An agreement between elders, childhood sweethearts. Didn't that mean that she and Rong Xiao were engaged by their elders a long time ago? It was only because someone snatched her away that they didn't get together. And, the princess consort of the Yuntian Tower was actually an outsider. Although Elder Bo Yen and the others already knew about the news from the Yuntian Tower, it wasn't spread. Many people in the academy didn't know about it. That was why they were so shocked when they heard it. Gradually, the crowd started to talk about it. I heard that the princess consort of the Yuntian Tower had a mysterious background. I didn't expect her to be an outsider. Let alone senior brother Rong Xiao, such a person isn't even qualified to be with a third-rate family in the Divine Ruins world, right? TSK, I really don't know what senior brother Rong Xiao is thinking. Did he reject his engagement with Jiang Jiwon and marry another woman? Jiang Jiwon and senior brother Rong Xiao don't have an engagement, right? If they did, according to her personality, she would have announced it long ago. Even if they didn't, it should be about the same. After all, she was raised in the Yuntian Tower by their clan leader since she was young. It's obvious that she's being groomed to be the future princess consort of the Yuntian Tower. Unfortunately, I'm a little curious. I wonder what kind of woman could catch the eye of senior brother Rong Xiao. Everyone was talking. Chu Luiyue turned a deaf ear to them and walked to the mouth of the spring. Well, no matter what, everyone had left, leaving a big empty space. Dumpling flew down and stood on a rock beside the mouth of the spring. It lowered its head and drank. If it weren't for the fact that there were so many people around, it would have already charged in. Chu Luiyue smiled when he saw how happy it was. He looked up at Lu Yintong. Senior Sister Lu, many thanks. If it wasn't for Lu Yintong, things would have been a little tricky. Her voice brought Lu Yintong back to her senses. She raised her head subconsciously. Lu Yintong's heart sank when she saw the smiling young man standing beside the spring. He did it on purpose. This Chu Yu, he clearly did it on purpose. He must have expected that there would be a fight over the position next to the mouth of the spring, so he deliberately brought her along. She had become his target. She had offended those people for him. In the future, even if they pursued the matter, those people would only find trouble with her. As for Chu Yu, he had obtained all the benefits and could still sit back and relax. Lu Yintong wanted to explode. She wanted to scream hysterically. However, in the end, all that was left in her heart was despair. She couldn't do that. She had no reason. There had never been a moment when Lu Yintong regretted what she had done that day as much as she did now. From the beginning, she shouldn't have made that bet. She shouldn't have agreed to the conditions that Chu Yu had proposed. But now, it was too late to say anything. Thinking of the warning that Liang Xiaoxiao and the others had given her before they left, she gradually felt uneasy. Jiang Jiwan alone wasn't that difficult to deal with, but there were so many of them. Moreover, she still had the Yuntian Tower's clan leader behind her. Thinking of this, her legs finally went weak and she almost fell to the ground. Ah Tong! Gongxing hurriedly supported her. His brows were tightly knitted and his eyes were filled with worry. Ah Tong, I'll send you back first. Lu Yintong nodded with difficulty. Gongxing looked at Chu Luyue and said in a deep voice, "Junior brother Chu Yu, don't think that you can completely remove yourself from this matter. If anything happens to Ah Tong in the future, you definitely won't be able to escape." With that, he supported Lu Yintong and left. Chu Luyue lowered his head and glanced at Dumpling. "Dumpling, for you, I've offended everyone I could." Dumpling quickly raised her head. Her eyes were bright, and there seemed to be a silver tianlei flickering in the depths of her eyes. Chu Luyue couldn't help but smile. The effect at the mouth of the spring was really obvious. Dumpling was already very strong. I wonder what she would be like when her bloodline power fully awakens. While Dumpling was devouring the power in the spring, Chu Luyue wasn't idle either. The concentration of origin power on Thousand Wine Mountain was also very high. Perhaps it was because there was a lot of tianlei stored in the spring, but the origin power was somewhat different from the outside. Chu Luyue simply sat cross-legged and began to cultivate in peace. She was indeed getting closer and closer to breaking through to the middle stage of the 9th rank. In fact, she could already feel the invisible barrier. It was as if she could break it with just a little bit of force. Chu Luyue was waiting for that opportunity. Seeing Chu Luyue so calm and composed, the others on the mountain felt even more strange. Speaking of which, the source of today's dispute was still Chu Yu. Lu Yintong and Jiang Jiwan had completely fallen out, but he acted as if nothing had happened. Not only did he allow his contracted divine beast to drink the spring water, he even started to cultivate on the spot. Just what kind of confidence did he have to be so calm and collected? If he didn't have a backer, they wouldn't have heard of him. If it wasn't for his strong mental fortitude, this would have been proven several times since he entered the academy. It seemed that everything was progressing smoothly. However, as time passed, Chu Luyue became more and more anxious. Because she still couldn't think of a way to stay in Thousand Wine Mountain all day. Every day, Dumpling could only rely on the little time at night to accumulate power. More importantly, the power of heavenly lightning stored in the spring would only appear during the time of the prohibition. And that was the key to activating Dumpling's bloodline power. Bang! Halfway up the mountain, Chu Luyue slapped her hand, and the pills in the medicine cauldron quickly flew up. She quickly pulled them back and put them into a jade box. Click! The remnants of the rich medicinal fragrance spread out. Master! Chu Luyue walked over and presented the jade box with both hands. Elder Wanjing stroked his beard in satisfaction and took the jade box. I didn't expect you to choose this for your first pill refinement. As he spoke, he opened the jade box, and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. Actually, when Chu Luiyue and Lu Ziyan challenged each other, he saw it clearly from the Donghuang Bell Tower. He already knew that his new disciple's talent and ability in pill refinement were stronger than he expected. However, when he saw this pill, he was still shocked and overjoyed. You succeeded in refining a superior grade 8 pill on your first try. Moreover, you did every step very well. How rare. He looked at Chu Luiyue with emotion. It won't be long before you can try refining a grade 9 pill. Chu Luiyue chuckled, took out the medical book, and handed it over. Elder Wanzheng was stunned. What are you? Chu Luiyue paused. This student has finished reading this book, so I'll return it to you. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. The colors were gorgeous, and there were all kinds of charm. The air was filled with the rich smell of various herbs mixed together, making people feel intoxicated just by smelling it. Among them, she could see some elders and students. This scene was unexpectedly harmonious and moving. In the middle of the canyon was an empty space. An old man had set up a bed and was lying on it, looking very carefree. Occasionally, someone would go over. Chu Luiyue looked for a while and understood. That elder should be in charge of looking after the medicinal herbs of the Medicine Wind Valley. Everyone who wanted to exchange medicinal herbs from the Medicine Wind Valley had to go to him to register. Chu Luiyue flew down. The Medicine Wind Valley was huge, and there were countless types of medicinal herbs planted. Hence, it wasn't easy to accurately find the few medicinal herbs one wanted. Fortunately, Chu Luiyue had already roughly determined the location of 3 medicinal herbs at the beginning. Hence, she found them quickly after going down. There were still 2 left. She started to slowly search for them among the medicinal herbs scattered all over the mountain. Being surrounded by the rich medicinal fragrance, Chu Luiyue couldn't help but take a deep breath. She felt much more refreshed and comfortable. Chu Luiyue didn't lack medicinal herbs. After all, Taizu and Rongxiu's belongings were all with her. However, looking around, she still saw some precious medicinal herbs that she didn't have. Treasures of heaven and earth that were hard to come by outside seemed to be very common here. The #1 academy in the Divine Ruins world lived up to its name. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1182. Some people would look over from time to time, as if they had recognized Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue ignored all of them and continued to search for the herbs she needed. After looking around, she found one. However, she could not find the remaining bone-melting treasured leaf after searching for a long time. The Medicine Wind Valley was really too big, and there were too many types of herbs. The bone-melting treasured leaf was only the size of a fingernail, and was very difficult to find. However, this thing had always liked to grow towards the sun, and there was a high chance that it could be found on the sun side of the mountain. Chu Luiyue thought for a while, and walked towards the mountain on the left. After walking for a long distance, she finally smelled that familiar faint fishy smell. She was overjoyed. It should be in front. However, just as she was about to take a few quick steps forward to retrieve the bone-melting treasured leaf, a transparent enchantment suddenly appeared in front of her, emitting a faint glow. She stopped in her tracks. "Kid, that is not a place you can go." An old and low voice sounded, as if he had just woken up, and there was even a hint of laziness in it. Chu Luiyue looked at the faintly discernible silver lines on the barrier, as well as that astonishing pressure, and tactfully stopped and looked back. Her current location was very remote, and there was no one around. Looking around, those words seemed to have come from the elder lying in the middle of the Medicine Wind Valley in the distance. There was a very long distance between the two of them, and that elder was still lying on that small broken wooden bed, motionless, as if he was sleeping soundly. However, that voice was very clear, as if the person was right beside her. "Kid, what are you looking at?" That voice had a hint of ridicule. Chu Luiyue was sure that the person who spoke was indeed that person. She was secretly surprised. The Medicine Wind Valley was so big, but everything was obviously under the control of that elder. This huge barrier should be his handiwork. She cupped her fists in the direction of that elder and bowed respectfully. "Student Chu Yu greets elder. N. Chu Yu." Hearing her words, the elder's voice carried a bit of surprise. Then, Chu Luiyue saw that the elder who had been lying motionless finally sit up. He covered his eyebrows with one hand and glanced over. Even though she couldn't see the other party's face and expression clearly, Chu Luiyue was very sure that the other party was sizing her up with curiosity. "You're the brat who was sent to Pingmin Mountain after just one day." Chu Luiyue. It turned out that she was already so famous in Lingxiao College. Student is ashamed. She lowered her head slightly. Just now, this student only wanted to take a few pieces of bone-melting precious leaves. "I didn't know that I couldn't go there. I didn't mean to offend you, please forgive me. It's your first time here, so it's normal that you don't know about this." The elder didn't seem to blame Chu Luiyue. Instead, he laughed. "However, it seems that Wan Zheng is very satisfied with you. He actually let you come to the Medicine Wind Valley so quickly." The elders were obviously familiar with each other. Chu Luiyue didn't know how to respond for a moment, so she obediently quieted down. The location of the bone-melting precious leaves is indeed strange, but it's still within the boundary. Go and take it, but don't cross the boundary. There was a subtle fluctuation behind her. Chu Luiyue looked back and saw that the light on the boundary had dimmed a lot. It was obvious that the elder had deliberately reduced the power of the boundary. Feeling that the pressure that made her chest feel uncomfortable had been greatly reduced, Chu Luiyue breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. She immediately took a few steps forward and pushed aside a patch of barren grass. Sure enough, she found a few stalks of bone-melting precious leaves in the narrow crack under a huge rock. The leaves were dark green in color and were only the size of a fingernail. The edges were jagged and covered with a faint layer of white frost. They looked crystal clear like green jade. If one looked carefully, one could see the fine veins in the leaves, which looked like a skeleton. Chu Luiyue carefully took a few leaves. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew. The fine strands of hair on her forehead fell down, making her cheeks slightly itchy. She straightened her back and inadvertently looked forward. Suddenly, her eyes focused. After the power of the boundary was greatly reduced, the scene that was originally blurry became much clearer. This also allowed her to see the scenery that she had not noticed before. In the distance, there seemed to be a dark blue lake. The lake water was clear and there was a faint layer of white mist on the surface of the lake, adding a bit of hazy beauty. However, this was not the reason why Chu Luiyue was so shocked. She frowned slightly, her eyes fixed on the translucent pink flowers blooming on the surface of the lake, and waves rose in her heart. That was dancing lotus. Large patches of dancing lotus swayed gently on the surface of the lake, as if it was a paradise. The dancing lotus was extremely precious and difficult to cultivate. Even Chu Luiyue did not dare to guarantee that she could cultivate a dancing lotus. Thinking back to the time when she wanted to get that one, she went through many twists and turns, and now, there were so many of them here. Just as Chu Luiyue was shocked, a wave of light flashed in front of her eyes, and a strong pressure attacked her. She suddenly came back to her senses and quickly took a few steps back. When she looked up again, the boundary had returned to its original appearance. However, the lake and the blooming dancing lotuses that he had seen just now had already become blurry and disappeared. Chapter 1183. The elders and students of the academy all needed herbs from the Medicine Wind Valley to refine pills. In the entire academy, only one person had her own herb garden. That student whose name was erased from the azure sky roll. In that case, that herb garden belonged to that person. Chu Luiyue thought to herself. Previously, she had only heard Zhong Sun mention that the dean had specially dug out a piece of land from the Medicine Wind Valley for that student to use as her herb garden. And that place was off-limits to others. Chu Luiyue had originally thought that it was hidden in some secret place, but she did not expect that it was right beside the Medicine Wind Valley. It was just that the elders had used a barrier to separate it, so the people in the Medicine Wind Valley were unable to detect it. Chu Luiyue recalled that when she had first arrived, she had stood at the top of the mountain and looked around. At that time, she did not see any extra boundaries. Now that she thought about it, that herb garden should have been concealed by some special means. Originally, Chu Luiyue did not have much interest in that herb garden, but when she saw the large expanse of blooming dancing lotuses, she suddenly felt extremely curious and wanted to investigate. She also could not say where this feeling came from. It was as if there was something hidden inside that had an inexplicable attraction to her. But these were only thoughts that flashed through Chu Luiyue's mind. She lowered her eyes. Elder is right, this student will definitely keep it in mind. Elder Meng Yi liked this attitude very much. He laughed mischievously. All right. You don't need to be nervous. You are Wan Zheng's disciple after all, this face has to be given. Right, let's calculate the points for these things. He pointed to the side with his mouth. Only then did Chu Luiyue see a green jade token hanging at the head of the bed. Thinking about it, it should be his. Just put your black jade token on it. Chu Luiyue obediently did as she was told. The moment the two tokens touched, a white light flashed. Chu Luiyue clearly saw that the number on it had changed from 6 to 5. She immediately felt her heart ache. So expensive. These few herbs were not ordinary items, so the price was naturally not cheap. Fortunately, these were given by Elder Wan Zheng, so they were still acceptable. In the future, she would definitely have to pay for it herself. Chu Luiyue took back her black jade token and bowed to bid farewell. After her figure disappeared from the Medicine Wind Valley, Elder Meng Yi stroked his beard and lay back down. He crossed his legs and swung his feet. Why does this kid? Why does he look so familiar? Chu Luiyue returned with the herbs. Elder Wan Zheng, when he saw her return, he smiled. Everything went well. Chu Luiyue said. I didn't let Master down. I've brought everything back. Elder Wan Zheng counted the items and nodded in satisfaction. With Master backing you, you can refine however you want. Digression, 3 seconds of silence for Elder Wan Zheng. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1184. With that, Chu Luiyue was relieved. Such an opportunity was hard to come by. Of course, she had to cherish it. Hence, she quickly recalled the herbs she had seen in the Medicine Wind Valley today. After doing some calculations, she finally came to a conclusion. She had struck it rich this time. Even if it was because Elder Wan Zheng was willing to spend so much money, she had to refine the pills properly this time. Thousands of miles away, in the dark feather abyss. Surrounded by mountains, it was verdant and rich. In the middle was an azure water body. Countless trees grew in it, adding to the beautiful greenery. The sky and water merged into one. The tree branches swayed, and water poured down from one direction, forming a faint silver waterfall. It was like a river flowing through the forest. It was magnificent and wonderful. This was an extremely special place in the divine ruins world. It was said that thousands of years ago, there was once a king of equipment refinement who had successfully refined a king's source tool here. It was a pity that he had exhausted all his strength and essence chi. Not long after he had refined it, he had died. That king's source tool had been lost in the dark feather abyss since then, and its whereabouts were unknown. For thousands of years, countless cultivators from the divine ruins world had come here. They had dug 3 feet into the ground to find that king's source tool. However, the dark feather abyss was full of danger. Cultivators had died here one after another, but no one had found that item. Gradually, the number of people who came here decreased. However, in recent months, strange phenomena had occurred in the dark feather abyss. Many people guessed that the king's source tool was about to be born. Hence, everyone was shocked. Many forces were eager to take advantage of this opportunity to take it for themselves. Originally, the Spirit Firmament Academy rarely participated in such matters. However, it was different this time. That was because the king of equipment refinement who had died here back then was from Lingxiao College. Hence, this time, a team formed by several elders and students had made preparations and come here. Rong Xiao and the others had been waiting here for a full 10 days. During this process, there were still people coming from all over. Some people wanted to retreat when they saw Lingxiao College's team. In the end, they tactfully chose to leave. But there was still a part that remained. It was true that Lingxiao College was the #1 college in the Divine Ruins world, and it was also true that Rong Xiao and the others were backed by extraordinary first-rate families. But even so, it was not enough to dismiss everyone. After all, the Yuntian Tower was not the only first-rate family in the Divine Ruins. Moreover, with benefits in front of them, who would care about such things? At this time, everyone had gathered at Dark Feather's Abyss, waiting for the appearance of the legendary King Yuan device. It has already been so long. Other than the occasional strange phenomenon in the sky, there has been no reaction from below. I don't know when that treasure will appear, a young woman's voice came from the crowd of Lingxiao College students. It's a king-grade origin tool after all, so it's only natural that it would take a lot of effort. He had already waited for thousands of years. What was a little bit more to him? Someone beside him consoled him. Yeah. It has been a long time since a Yuan tool of this level has appeared in the Divine Ruins world. Moreover, this belongs to a senior elder of our academy. No matter how long it takes, we still have to wait. Not only do we have to wait, but we also have to successfully bring that thing back. Otherwise, wouldn't this trip be a waste? It would be embarrassing for the academy. They discussed in low voices. However, Rong Xiao did not say anything from the beginning to the end. He just stood at the side and waited patiently. He wore a snow-white brocade robe and stood tall and straight. He seemed to be quietly admiring the scenery of Dark Feather's Abyss. But if one looked closely, they would see that the surrounding heaven and earth origin force was quickly and silently surging into his body. This was something that his companions had already noticed on the way here. But every time they saw it, they could not help but feel shocked. Only a person who had completely stepped into the god level could do this. But he was still able to do it so smoothly and casually. It was so easy that it was hard for others to even feel jealous. When a person was slightly more outstanding than the people around them, they would often be envied and even ostracized. But if the difference was so great that they could only look up to him, then those emotions would turn into admiration and admiration. Rong Xiao was the second type. It was not that no one wanted to surpass him, but it was just too difficult. Rong Xiao has left the academy for a few years, right? I didn't expect his strength to increase so quickly. Even some of the academy's elders might not be his match now, right? Didn't they say that the Yuntian Tower has been in chaos these past few years? I thought he would be busy dealing with these matters and would not have the time and energy to cultivate properly. Who knew? Now that the Yuntian Tower is in his hands, his strength has increased greatly. How did he do it? You're asking me. If I knew, would I still be like this? The group of people roared with laughter, and the atmosphere was quite harmonious. But sometimes, there were people who liked to ruin such an atmosphere. He just broke through to the God level a step earlier. What's there to be suspicious about? Wei Shiping's face was cold, and his voice was laced with sarcasm. The surrounding people gradually quieted down. Many people looked at each other and secretly exchanged glances. A young woman smiled and said, "That's easy. Wei Shiping, you're a famous genius cultivator. Don't tell me you don't know how difficult it is to break through to the God level a step earlier." They were about the same age, and they had entered the academy at the same time. But now, Rong Xiao had broken through to the God level, and they could only look up to him. The gap between them was getting wider and wider. How could they not be moved? Wei Shiping gritted his teeth and did not reply. He thought to himself, when I have the chance, I'll teach Rong Xiao a lesson. This time, when the King Source tool appeared, I must get it before Rong Xiao. Rong Xiao was completely oblivious to all the discussions. He kept devouring the force of heaven and earth around him to strengthen his cultivation base. At the same time, he looked down at the scenery below and around him. His handsome and devilish face was expressionless. No one knew what he was thinking. Rumble. A loud noise suddenly came from the sky. The originally noisy discussions all disappeared. Everyone raised their heads to look. In the originally cloudless sky, dark clouds were rapidly gathering. The wind howled, and thunder rumbled. The sky quickly darkened. It's for real this time. That thing is about to appear. On a mountain peak not far away, a burly man with dark skin laughed. Just in time. Let me see how big of a commotion this King Source tool can cause. Rong Xiao looked up as well. His deep eyes were calm and unfathomable. Rumble. Tianlei landed. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from LoveNet. Chapter 1185. The waterfall below gradually stopped flowing. A whirlpool appeared in the center of the blue water. As time passed, the whirlpool gradually expanded and swallowed all the trees in the surroundings silently. At the same time, the dark clouds in the sky seemed to be attracted by some kind of force and started to rotate slowly, forming a huge storm. Between heaven and earth, there was darkness. The wind howled, and the pressure was heavy. The people waiting on the peaks of the dark feather abyss were all energized. Judging from the situation, the King Yuan artifact was about to appear. When all the water in the water is sucked dry, that will be the time when the King Yuan artifact appears. At that time, we must act quickly and snatch the artifact before anyone else. Elder Shu Feng instructed seriously. Everyone nodded their heads and waited for the battle to begin. Time passed slowly. Under the whirlpool, there seemed to be a black hole that kept swallowing everything around it. The storm in the sky also gradually came down. Countless pairs of eyes stared at this scene. At a certain moment, just as the whirlpool was about to disappear, the storm hit. The two collided. Boom! A loud sound came from within. The next moment, a dazzling light burst out from within. Now! Elder Shu Feng gave the order and took the lead to charge out. The people behind him also moved out. At the same time, the people waiting at the dark feather abyss all rushed over. Lingshao College was actually the fastest. Seeing that they were about to take the lead, the others started to panic. The dark-skinned brawny man who spoke earlier suddenly shouted in a deep voice. Everyone! Let's join forces. Elder Shu Feng and the others' hearts sank when they heard this. Sure enough, the man then shouted again, Hey! This treasure was left behind by the people of the Spirit Firmament Academy back then. If they want to snatch it, it will be much easier for them than for us. Why don't we join forces to defeat them first and then decide who the treasure belongs to? His voice was deep and full of energy. As soon as he opened his mouth, his voice spread out between the heavens and the earth. Many people hesitated for a moment and looked at each other with complicated expressions. Elder Shu Feng shouted angrily. Golden Wing sect. How dare you? The man laughed out loud. I've already dared to steal from you in front of you. What's there to be afraid of? Their Golden Wing sect was also a first-rate sect in the Divine Ruins world. Moreover, they had a deep foundation and were full of confidence. Lingxiao College had a prestigious status, but it was just a college after all. It was true that there were many experts, but it was still different from the orthodox sects and aristocratic families. After all, it was impossible for Lingxiao College to have all the elders and students risk their lives for the school. Moreover, even though the treasure that had appeared today was a rarely seen king-grade origin tool, it definitely wasn't enough for Lingxiao College to fall out with everyone because of it. That was why they dared to snatch it so brazenly. In addition, there were other people present, so they were even more unscrupulous. Everyone. What are you hesitating for? Since you're already here, do you intend to watch the treasure fall into the hands of others? This sentence finally made the people from the other sects and clans make up their minds. Swoosh. 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 Those who had originally planned to charge toward the center had all turned around and were heading toward the people from Lingxiao College. Other than Lingxiao College, there was also the Four Directions sect here. Their numbers added up to almost 180 people, which was several times more than Lingxiao Academy's side. Even if the people from Lingxiao College were all quite strong, they wouldn't be able to withstand the siege of so many people. After all, if they dared to openly oppose them, their strength wouldn't be too weak. If they were to fight against them, they would definitely lose today's battle. Several groups of people surrounded the Spirit Firmament Academy, trapping them within. Elder Shu Feng's mind raced as he looked at Rongxiu. Rongxiu. We'll hold them back. Find an opportunity to retrieve that item. Rongxiu nodded slightly. Ha! Do you think it's that easy to dodge? The man sneered and charged toward Rongxiu. I'll take you on first. Rongxiu raised his eyes slightly. His expression was cold, and there was no emotion in the depths of his eyes. In the next moment, his figure suddenly vanished on the spot. What? Not only the man who was about to fight Rongxiu, but also the other people who were watching were all shocked. They weren't shocked that Rongxiu knew how to teleport, but they were shocked that he could still move so easily and freely under such strong suppression. There were quite a number of great gods present. Even if they were all great gods, they might not be able to escape so quickly. The next moment, Rongxiu appeared behind the crowd. He was only a short distance away from the dazzling ball of light. The man from the Golden Wing sect was the first to react. He shouted, "Stop him!" Elder Shu Feng ordered, "Let's go." Go! The two sides clashed and quickly descended into a chaotic battle. A few cold gusts of wind came from behind, but Rongxiu did not turn around. He quickly dodged them and easily avoided them. In the blink of an eye, he was already at the location of the storm. Standing there, everything was presented clearly in front of his eyes. The water from before had disappeared, and there was only a huge black vortex spinning slowly above the swamp-like wetland. It was dark and bottomless. Looking down from above, it looked like a giant beast with its bloody mouth wide open. Once one fell into it, endless torture and death awaited them. At this moment, the storm formed by the gathering dark clouds in the sky had already connected with the vortex. The grayish-black storm was also gradually being swallowed by the black hole. At the point where the two connected, there was a ball of light that was emitting a dazzling light. It was only the size of a person's head, and its light was soft and bright. It was exuding a vast and divine aura. Rongxiu stared at it, and a look of surprise flashed across his eyes. This aura, it doesn't seem to be a King-grade Yuan device. Die. Rongxiu's momentary daze gave the people behind him an opportunity to attack. The difference in numbers was too great. Even though the people from Lingxiao College had already done their best, they were gradually at a disadvantage. Some people took the opportunity to break through their defense line and went straight for Rongxiu. Sensing the cold aura behind him, Rongxiu's expression turned cold, and a murderous intent flashed across his eyes. He did not turn around. He only raised his hand and waved it. A golden light flew out. It formed an extremely sturdy barrier around him. The muscular man who was originally confident of victory suddenly changed his expression. At this moment, Rongxiu had already rushed forward and grabbed the ball of light. Pfft! Elder Shu Feng could not fight against 4 hands with 2 fists, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. However, he immediately noticed the commotion on Rongxiu's side, and he couldn't help but be elated. He endured the bloody smell in his mouth and hollered. Activate the formation. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1186. The elders at the side moved simultaneously. Chi. Rays of brilliant light flew out and intertwined in midair. In the blink of an eye, they formed a huge Xian formation. A faint suppressive aura spread out from it. The surrounding space was distorted, and several black spatial cracks appeared. They're leaving. Suddenly, someone exclaimed loudly. The man from the Golden Wings sect looked at Rongxiu with anger and jealousy. However, for some reason, he did not move forward, as if he was afraid of something. Hearing that shout, he hesitated for a moment and turned around. Destroy their Xian formation. Everyone knew that once the Xian formation was completed, the people from Lingxiao College would be able to escape quickly. At that time, it would be even more difficult for them to stop them. Everyone attacked together. Elder Shu Feng and the rest did not care about their own safety and increased the speed of building the Xian formation. The Xian formation was complicated and beautiful. As the patterns on it were completed, the aura on it became stronger. I'd like to see how you're going to go back today. With a low shout, the man from the Golden Wings sect suddenly leaped up. He held a huge black axe in his hand and slashed it down fiercely. Crack! A crack appeared on the Xian formation. Terrifying energy surged out from the crack. It scattered in all directions. The faces of Elder Shu Feng and the others turned pale. If the Xian formation was destroyed, they would not be able to rush back to the academy in time. With so many people attacking them, they would definitely be defeated. He was furious and looked at the man. Jin Lei. Do you really want to go against Lingxiao College? Jin Lei laughed. Elder Shu Feng, please don't misunderstand. At the end of the day, all we want is that King Source tool. As long as you hand it over, I promise to let you go immediately. Furthermore, I'll personally come and apologize to you on another day. Elder Shu Feng was so angry that he laughed. This thing originally belonged to Lingxiao College. You've gone overboard by snatching it so brazenly. Do you still want us to hand it over? 1,000 years have passed. Jin Lei interrupted him with an arrogant look on his face. This thing was not refined in your Spirit Firmament Academy. Even the weapon refining king from back then had fallen here. Not even his bones were left. Then, how can this treasure belong to your academy? Since it's an ownerless item, what's wrong with us snatching it? You're being unreasonable. Elder Shu shouted. Stabilize the Xian formation. Jin Lei raised the axe in his hand again. Everyone, lend me a hand. There was already a crack in the Xian formation. If there was another crack, it would definitely collapse completely. The others also seemed to have seen a glimmer of hope. They all revealed excited expressions and poured their origin power into the axes. A terrifying power surged forth. Heaven and earth. The sweet and fishy taste in Elder Estranged Wind's mouth became even thicker. The rest of the people's Lingxiao College. Right at this moment, a golden streak of light flew over. Of the Xian were of the sun, following this buzzing sound, the Xian formation that was on the verge of collapse quickly recovered. The golden light also quickly split into many small branches that spread to the surroundings. In an instant, it covered more than half of the Xian formation. Seeing this scene, even the people from the Spirit Firmament Academy were shocked. Rong Xiao had dabbled in Xian masters, but he had always been outstanding as a martial artist and an instrument refiner. Therefore, everyone had always thought that although his comprehension of Xian masters was also very good, it could not be compared to his other two talents. But now, they realized that Rong Xiao had already become a top-notch expert in Xian masters. This Xian formation was successfully constructed with the combined efforts of so many people. Rong Xiao had actually repaired the Xian formation that was on the verge of collapse with his own strength and completed the remaining parts. Wei Shiping looked at the man who was floating in mid-air with his clothes fluttering in the wind. His white clothes fluttered like an immortal, but he was so powerful that people could only look up to him. Rong Xiao, was the gap between them already so big? He clenched his teeth and lowered his eyes to hide the unwillingness and jealousy that flashed across his eyes. At this moment, the Xian formation was finally completed. Elder Shu Feng immediately shouted, "Open." Following his command, a huge crack suddenly appeared in the sky above the brilliant Xian formation. Rong Xiao. Let's go. Elder Shu Feng anxiously shouted. Rong Xiao took a step forward, and his figure quickly disappeared into the crack. Then, the Lingxiao College students followed suit. Seeing them leave one by one, Jean Lei could not help but grip the axe in his hand tightly and was about to rush forward, chase. The people behind him hurriedly dissuaded him, "No. This Xian formation has torn space. The other end must be Lingxiao College. We can't go there." "That's right. We can still fight them here, but if we go to their territory, I'm afraid," everyone was discussing and expressing their opposition. Jean Lei's face darkened. If they let them leave with the Emperor-grade Yuan tool, they would not be willing to do so. There's a special barrier outside Lingxiao College. It's heavily guarded, and no one is allowed to enter or leave as they wish. I'm guessing that they're going to return to Fangzhou first. As long as they can make it in time, it's not impossible. He looked around and scanned the crowd with his cold eyes. Suddenly, he sneered. "Have you forgotten? That's a Emperor-grade Yuan tool. Since we've already offended Lingxiao College, what's the difference?" His words made many people waver. Chapter 1187. There was quite a distance between here and there, but Elder Wanjing was still sensitive enough to detect a dangerous aura. His brows furrowed tightly, and he was about to leave. But after taking half a step, he suddenly remembered that Chu Luiyue was refining pills beside him. He forcefully suppressed the waves in his heart. After thinking about it, he still decided to stay here and wait for Chu Luiyue to finish refining the pills. Even if the academy was really in danger, there were other elders around. It wouldn't hurt to be a little late. On the other hand, Chu Luiyue was at the crucial moment of refining the pills. It wouldn't be good if they were to interrupt her. Chu Luiyue also realized that something was wrong with him. She turned her gaze and looked at him. His face was filled with anticipation and excitement, but now it was filled with nervousness and worry. Her heart also sank slightly. "Master, what's wrong?" Elder Wanjing quickly shook his head. Nothing. Just concentrate on refining the pills. Master is here to help you. Don't be distracted. It's almost done." Chu Luiyue didn't believe him. She had been in the academy for quite some time, but she had never seen Elder Wanjing with such an expression. She wanted to ask again, but after thinking about it, she held back and put her attention back on refining the pills. In the flames, a fist-sized pill had already appeared. Feeling the power contained in it, Chu Luiyue was slightly relieved. This time, she might really succeed. Although she was a 9th-grade celestial physician, she couldn't help but feel excited and happy to be able to climb up this ladder after her rebirth. Every day since she was reborn, she hoped that she could return to her peak and even become stronger. She didn't expect that the first to succeed would be a celestial physician. She held her breath and became more careful. Elder Wanjing, who was at the side, still couldn't completely relax. From time to time, he would look in that direction. The academy's operation this time was confidential. Even some elders weren't clear about it. It showed how important this matter was to everyone. Calculating the time, they had been gone for more than 20 days. It was normal for them to return at this time. But that fluctuation, it was obviously strange and uneasy. Whoosh! Whoosh! In midair, several figures flashed past. Those were obviously the elders who had sensed that something was wrong and hurried over. Elder Wanjing slowly clenched his fists. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. She originally also wanted to concentrate on refining pills, but that subtle change in aura on Elder Wanjing's body seriously made her unable to ignore it. She stared intently at the pill in the cauldron, carefully controlling the flame to condense it, and said, "Master, if there's really something urgent, you can go first. Anyway, I'm almost done here." "That won't do. I want to see it personally." "You don't have to care about those things, just focus on refining pills." Elder Wanjing was very insistent. Chu Luiyue had no choice but to swallow the rest of his words. However, he was getting more and more curious. For Elder Wanjing to be so worried, it must not be a small matter. Just now, a few elders had already flown over the sky. It seemed like they were heading towards the entrance of the academy. Could it be that someone had barged in to cause trouble? However, as soon as this thought appeared, it was dispelled by Chu Luiyue. This was Lingshao College. Who would have the guts to cause trouble here? Wouldn't that be causing trouble for themselves? The red flame continued to burn, and the pill in it gradually condensed. A medicinal fragrance wafted from it. Elder Wanjing's eyes lit up. He could not help but take a step forward and clasped his hands tightly in front of him. Was this about to succeed? Whoosh! Another silhouette flew across the sky. Elder Wanjing instantly felt as if he had been hit by a bucket of cold water. It seemed that the situation was worse than expected. His brows were tightly knitted together as he stared at Chu Luiyue and the pill in front of her. He did not blink, and his heart was beating rapidly. At this moment, time seemed to pass exceptionally slowly. The medicinal fragrance of the pill was getting stronger. Chu Luiyue held her breath and activated the force in her body. It transformed into flames and surged out crazily. Buzz! A strong wave of energy circulated in the cauldron. Chu Luiyue's heart calmed down. The pill was about to be formed. She slammed her hand on the cauldron. The flame exploded. The pill in the middle became rounder and rounder. Lines and lines began to appear clearly on the surface. Chu Luiyue's lips were already a little pale. To the current her, it was indeed a little difficult to concoct a 9th-grade medicinal pill. After this round of refining, she had basically used up all her strength. In addition, she had already failed twice before, so she had even less energy left. Therefore, this pill was really hard to come by. Waves of weakness assaulted her, almost making her legs go soft. She bit the tip of her tongue and used the sharp pain to force herself to be clear-headed. The faint smell of blood spread between her lips and teeth. However, Chu Luiyue did not care about that at this moment. As long as she could successfully refine the pill, Elder Wanjing's promise would be fulfilled. Thinking of this, she used all her strength to send the last bit of strength in her body into the cauldron and merged it with the flame. Whoosh! The pills suddenly flew up. It seemed to want to escape. Chu Luyue clenched her teeth and controlled it. As long as she could hold on a little longer, this pill would. Wan Zheng. Why are you still here? Feng Zhou is already in a mess. An anxious voice suddenly sounded. It was Elder Hua Feng who had rushed over. That thing is now on Rongxiu, and it's being besieged by them. Bang! An explosive sound came from Chu Luyue's cauldron. Black ashes scattered in all directions. A thick burnt smell filled the air. Chu Luyue's pill was destroyed. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Finish him. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. When he raised his head, his expression had returned to normal. Shuishing, Shishir, why are you here? In addition to these two people, Luo Yanming was also beside them. The cultivation of these three people was different, so it was rare to see them together. Shuishing winked. Why do you think we're here? Of course it's the same as you. Luo Shishir patiently explained. We were originally cultivating with Master, but something happened at the last minute. Master left, so we came here. We just happened to meet fifth brother. The master she was talking about was Elder Wenxi. Chu Luyue nodded. I was refining medicine just now, and Elder Hua Feng came over and called Master to leave together. In fact, many students were in this situation. Therefore, Luo Shishir and the others didn't think much of Chu Luyue's explanation. Did you hear what those people said just now? Shuishing asked mysteriously. How dare they chase us to Fangzhou to rob us? Are they crazy? Luo Yanming, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. The Golden Wing sect is tyrannical. Although they are also a first-class family, their inherited cultivation method is very domineering. In the sect, from the sect master to the disciples, their combat strength is extremely strong, so they have always been very arrogant. It's not surprising that they would do such a thing. People die for wealth, and birds die for food. The item that could make Lingxiao College send out so many elders and students was definitely not an ordinary item. It was obvious that it would arouse the jealousy of outsiders. Moreover, the other party seemed to be the joint forces of several sects, so they were naturally not afraid. As long as they finish the battle quickly and don't stay here for too long, it won't be a big problem. Shuisheng looked at him strangely. Yanming, how do you know so much? Luo Yanming was silent for a moment. Master said a few more words before he left. Elder Hua Feng had a carefree personality. After hearing the news, he was very shocked and didn't bother to hide it. As he spoke, Luo Yanming and the others beside him heard most of it. The few of them, Chu Luyue recalled the situation just now and mourned for the 9th grade pill that he should have successfully refined. Elder Hua Feng is sometimes in a hurry, dong. A low and melodious sound of a bell rang out. It came from the Donghuang bell tower. The square quickly quietened down, and everyone looked up. Elder Bo Yen stood upstairs with one hand behind his back. His hair was white, and his expression was calm. There's a small accident outside the school, but it will be resolved soon. Everyone, go back first and cultivate in peace. A deep and powerful voice spread out majestically. It was gentle and clear in everyone's ears, making them unconsciously calm down. Originally, some of the students were still worried and uneasy, but after hearing Elder Bo Yan's words, they gradually calmed down. Chapter 1190. His words woke her up from her daze. Jiang Jiwan originally wanted to fight for a chance to go out, even if it was just to show her face in front of Rongxiu, to let him know that she was willing to sacrifice everything for him. But now that Elder Bo Yen had spoken, she suddenly realized how stupid she was to say such words in front of everyone. I didn't mean that, she was a little flustered and hurriedly explained. I'm just worried about Senior Rongxiu. Rongxiu's talent and ability is the best in Lingxiao College, and now he is the holy son of Yuntian Tower. Don't tell me that his ability to protect himself is not as good as yours, and you need to worry about him. Elder Bo Yan's tone was calm, but his words made Jiang Jiwan even more embarrassed. The square was silent. Everyone's gaze towards Jiang Jiwan also became complicated. That's right. Elder Bo Yan's words were not without reason. The situation outside was indeed dangerous, but many of the elders in the Lingxiao College had already been mobilized, and they could not allow those people to behave atrociously in the Lingxiao College. Furthermore, Rongxiu himself was the first on the Green Cloud Roll of Honor, and she was only a demigod. What was the use of worrying here? Even if she went, she would only be adding to the trouble and become a burden to everyone. Since that was the case, then her words were exceptionally, someone wants to put on a show of being infatuated in front of everyone, but she has to see if she has the qualifications and ability. Someone from the crowd sneered. Jiang Jiwan's face instantly turned red and white. She quickly raised her head to look, trying to identify who said that. But there were many people in the square, and the voice was unfamiliar, so she could not recognize who said that. She bit her lips tightly, her face full of grievance. In the past, when she showed such an expression, she would receive a lot of love and sympathy. But this time, it did not seem to be of any use. When the Lingxiao College was in trouble, everyone's first thought was the Lingxiao College, and not her. Jiang Jiwan's actions were obviously for her own benefit, so everyone did not think much of it, and even felt disgusted. Exactly. Elder Bo Yan had already told everyone to go back and wait patiently, but she insisted on going. What could she do there? Was he sending himself to death? Ha! I think she thinks too highly of herself, doesn't she? She was worried about senior brother Rongxiu. What was her status? Actually, I'm also very worried about senior Rongxiu. However, I know what I'm capable of. I won't cause trouble for senior brother and the elders at this time. The mocking words were like steel needles piercing into Jiang Jiwan's heart, tearing her self-esteem and face to shreds. He threw them on the ground and trampled on them. She had always been favored by the heavens. Chapter 1191. Chu Luyue grabbed the dagger and held it tightly in her palm. As such, she could feel the violent tremors even more clearly. Chu Luyue's heart also seemed to be beating faster, as if it was going to jump out of her chest. She quickened her pace and soon felt the pressure from the barrier. The closer she got, the heavier it felt. She was at the foot of a mountain. There were a few huge rocks piled up beside her, and she quickly hid behind them. Because the sky had darkened and this place was desolate to begin with, not many people came and went, so no one noticed her. However, Chu Luyue did not dare to relax. She thought that she knew that the difficulty she had to overcome was not this, but the huge barrier in front of her. What method did he have to use to open the barrier without making a sound? Chu Luyue frowned. Suddenly, a white light flashed in her mind. That's it. Previously, when she first entered the academy and stood outside the barrier, some vague memory fragments flashed through her mind. She did not know who set up a small Xian formation and connected it to the barrier. Then, like a key, it easily opened the barrier. If she could also construct that Xian formation, then, this thought made Chu Luyue restless. She closed her eyes and began to frantically search through that memory fragment. If she remembered correctly, that Xian formation did not seem to be particularly difficult. With her current strength, she might be able to succeed if she put in some effort. However, at that time, the scene had only flashed past her eyes. She hadn't even realized anything before the scene had completely disappeared. Therefore, she only had a vague impression. She did not remember what that Xian formation looked like. And now, what she needed to do was to recall the Xian formation in its entirety and in its entirety. This was easy to say, but when it came to doing it, it was full of difficulties. Her memory was mostly missing, so even she did not know when that memory belonged to, and did not know what happened before and after that. This made it even more difficult for her to recall. She wanted to pick up that vague memory fragment now, but it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Her surroundings were quiet, and a gentle breeze blew past, blowing the hair on her forehead. She could clearly hear the sound of her heart beating. Countless images flashed through his mind. At this moment, time became extremely difficult to endure. Finally, she recalled the fragment and began to search for the details in her mind. In the blurry image, there was still a pair of fair and slender hands. That pair of hands lightly waved in the air, and several streams of light danced, quickly forming a profound formation. In Chu Liuyue's eyes, that small Xian formation was actually just a blurry ball of light. She did not give up and patiently watched. The same scene continued to play out. Again and again, over and over again. This was the moment. Chu Liyue suddenly felt that there seemed to be some kind of subtle connection between herself and the barrier. This feeling was not unfamiliar. She pursed her lips and walked forward, landing soundlessly. As she approached, the pressure and power on her body also became more and more terrifying. When she stood in front of it, even her bones faintly hurt. But Chu Liyue didn't have the heart to care about this at this moment. She stretched out her hand according to the image in her mind. Crack! An extremely soft sound was heard. The huge barrier slowly split open from the middle. This movement was extremely small, and even the barrier beside it wasn't affected at all. It was still as calm as before. Chu Liyue raised her leg and stepped out. Boom! Chu Liyue had just walked out of the barrier when she heard a loud sound coming from afar. She suddenly raised her head, and her expression was immediately shocked as her pupils shrank. In the sky far away, hundreds of people were fighting. The sound just now came from there. Forces of various colors flew and collided wildly. It was extremely chaotic. But Chu Liyue still saw Rong Xiao at a glance. At this moment, he seemed to be surrounded and attacked by a group of people. His snow-white brocade robe was already stained with several messy bloodstains. And those people had no intention of letting him go. A sharp arrow suddenly pierced through the air. It went straight for Rong Xiao's back. The peach blossom on Chu Liyue's wrist bloomed enchantingly. The force around her surged wildly. In the next moment, her figure suddenly disappeared. Chapter 1192. Rong Xiao felt the cold wind coming from behind him. His eyes turned sharp and golden light surged in his palm. Suddenly, he paused and a rare look of surprise flashed across his face. In that moment of hesitation, the sharp arrow had arrived behind him and was about to pierce through his body. Rong Xiao. Elder Xu Feng and the others were shocked when they saw this scene from afar. Their eyes widened, and their faces were filled with shock as they cried out in a deep voice. Get out of the way! How could Rong Xiao be distracted at a time like this? Jean Lei sneered. The corners of his mouth curled up and his eyes were full of mockery. He was almost sure that he would win. Rong Xiao was very good at fighting. Previously, they had besieged him, but they did not gain any advantage over him. But so what? At this critical moment, there was no room for absent-mindedness or hesitation. The slightest mistake could lead to extremely serious consequences. However, just when he thought that he could wait for Rong Xiao to be injured and defeated, a slender figure suddenly appeared behind Rongxiu. That person appeared so suddenly that he did not even cause any energy fluctuation. He was already there. Teleportation. When Jean Lei and the others saw this scene, they all had the same thought in their minds. Those who could teleport were at least great deities. However, they had already surrounded Rongxiu. The elders outside had tried several times but failed to break in. How could this person, clang? A crisp and powerful sound of collision was heard. That person was holding a black sword and had blocked the sharp arrow. Swish! That person raised his wrist slightly and the sharp arrow was deflected. It brushed against the black sword. The sound was ear-piercing. But soon after, that person's black sword quickly slashed down, directly cutting the arrow in half. Crack! Everything happened in an instant. Who is that? Jean Lei and the others tensed up and looked over. However, when they saw that person's face, they were all stunned. That was a young man. It was indeed a young man. He wore a light green brocade robe, and his figure was slender and tall. His appearance was delicate and pretty, and there was a hint of youthfulness on his face. He definitely didn't look more than 20 years old. That was a child who didn't seem to be on the same level as them. But at this moment, with the black sword in his hand, he suddenly and swiftly broke through their blockade and appeared behind Rongxiu, blocking the arrow for him. Almost instantly, everyone understood, he had used some kind of yuan tool that could teleport. There was a moment of silence in the chaotic scene. Chu Luiyue held her sword with both hands. That arrow almost made her hand go numb. If she hadn't been cultivating with Debao all this time and greatly improved her physical strength, she definitely wouldn't have been able to block that move. She could feel countless pairs of incomparably sharp eyes around her, which were like blades scraping her body. Who are you? Jean Lei shouted in a deep voice. He subconsciously wanted to see what realm this person was in, but he was surprised to find that the other party had concealed his aura extremely well. Even he couldn't pry into the young man's true strength. However, to be able to block that arrow, he seemed to be at least a rank 9 martial artist. Facing such a young face, it was really impossible to associate him with a god-level expert. Chu Luiyue turned a deaf ear to his words and only turned her head to look at Rongxiu. Their gazes met. The surprise and astonishment in Rongxiu's eyes had all dissipated, leaving only a heavy and indiscernible darkness. Between the ripples, there seemed to be an undercurrent surging. Just this one glance was enough. Chu Luiyue heaved a sigh of relief. His complexion and aura looked good, so he shouldn't be too seriously injured. And he seemed to be quite at ease. Her gaze quickly swept past the messy bloodstains on his clothes. Most of them shouldn't belong to him. This made her heart finally calm down, but at the same time, a thought flashed through her mind. Rongxiu's strength was indeed stronger than she had expected. This man, Chu Yu. Just as the people here fell into a strange silence, the few elders in the distance finally saw Chu Liyue's face clearly and couldn't help but be shocked. Elder Wanzheng was the most shocked. His face, which had always remained calm even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, was now filled with shock. After the shock, it was anger. Why are you here? Didn't this kid say that he was going back? Why did he suddenly appear here? And he directly rushed to the center of the group of people who were besieging him. Did he think that he had lived too long? Chu Luiyue wanted to explain, but the surrounding people were staring at her covetously, so she didn't have the chance to speak. Chu Yu. Jean Lei's dark eyes swept across Chu Luiyue and sneered. Looks like you're also a student of Lingshao College. He quickly ran through his mind. Among the first-rate families in the Divine Ruins world, there was no one with the surname Chu. This made him even more unscrupulous, and he didn't take Chu Luiyue seriously at all. Today, he had even offended the Yuntian Tower and so on. Why would he be afraid of such a small thing? You're quite bold at such a young age. Chu Luiyue gripped the long yuan sword in her hand tightly, but her expression didn't seem to be nervous. Hearing this, she even laughed. Everyone praises me like that. Jean Lei's eyelids twitched violently, and his expression quickly turned cold. Looks like the elders of your college really don't know how to teach people. Didn't anyone tell you that there are some people you can't afford to offend? Chu Luiyue blinked, then looked at Rong Xiao and asked with incomparable sincerity. Chapter 1193. Elder Wanzheng and the others were stunned. Jean Lei and the others had already made their move. Almost at the same time, the elders of the academy followed closely behind them. Quite a number of people were stopped. After all, there were many elders from the academy now. In terms of numbers, both sides were basically equal. However, there were still a few people who were faster. They surrounded Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue. Rong Xiao suddenly took a step forward and patted Chu Luiyue's shoulder lightly. Just stay here. Leave the rest to me. Chu Luiyue felt her shoulders sink. Then, something slid down her shoulder quietly. She opened her hand and quickly put that thing into her universe ring. She looked up at Rong Xiao. The two of them looked at each other and understood each other's intentions. She nodded without batting an eyelid. Senior brother, be careful. Rong Xiao raised his hand and quickly set up a golden barrier around Chu Luiyue. Then, he moved and stood in front of Chu Luiyue. I'm your opponent. He raised his chin slightly. His expression was calm, but there was a noble arrogance in his bones. Come at me together. Rong Xiao's words completely infuriated the few of them. Arrogant. In recent years, Rong Xiao was indeed famous as the holy son of the Yuntian Tower. It was rumored that his birth mother secretly married someone from outside the world of God and gave birth to him. A few years after he was born, he was found by the people of the Yuntian Tower and found. At first, the Yuntian Tower planned to execute him directly. After all, this kind of thing was a great stain on the reputation of any first-rate family in the world of God. However, the Yuntian Tower kept him alive in the end. It was all because of his amazing talent. Later, not only did he survive in the Yuntian Tower, he even became the Holy Sun in one fell swoop. It was rumored that this person was cruel and ruthless. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gained so much power and control over the Yuntian Tower in just a few years while the Yuntian Tower's patriarch was in seclusion. Therefore, Jean Lei and the others did not underestimate Rong Xiao from the very beginning. But now, when they heard his words, they still felt that it was ridiculous. After the fight just now, they had a rough idea of Rong Xiao's strength. It was normal for him to be able to hold on for a while, but it was impossible for him to challenge so many of them at the same time. Jean Lei was the first to attack. The others were not willing to fall behind, afraid that the treasure would be snatched away by Jean Lei, so they followed closely behind. Rong Xiao hovered in the air and raised his arm. A ball of golden light quickly appeared in his palm. At the same time, his aura began to surge wildly. With him as the center, a shocking pressure frantically spread out in all directions. Jean Lei's heart skipped a beat, suddenly feeling a little uneasy. Digression, February. What do you think about your man having two godly territories? Rong Xiao, calm smile waiting for praise. Pushed someone's face away. That's not important. What's important is that from today onwards, the monthly votes will be doubled. What do you think? February. I've already set the date for October's explosive release. The more monthly votes you get, the more explosive it will be. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1194. Following his command, the golden ball of light suddenly exploded. In an instant, golden light flashed. It was as bright as day between heaven and earth. The brilliant light instantly enveloped the surroundings. A powerful god territory descended. Before the few of them could fight Rongxiu, they were already trapped in this god territory. They instinctively wanted to use their own god territories to fight back, but they quickly realized in horror that in this god territory shrouded in golden light, their strength was severely suppressed, and they could not use their own god territories. In fact, even moving had become extremely difficult. This was truly a situation where they were meat on someone's chopping board. If they could not think of a way to break free as soon as possible, they could only stay here and be attacked by Rongxiu at will. Jin Lei actually had no intention of fighting with Rongxiu again. Dual divine domains, anyone who went up against him would only end up dead. However, even though he tried his best to retreat, it was already too late. This was because the distance between them and Rongxiu was very close to begin with, and he had charged at the front just now. It was too late for him to retreat now. Compared to the few of them who were stuck in a dilemma, Rongxiu, who was in the middle, seemed to be exceptionally relaxed. His gaze darkened, and the space in front of him began to collapse inch by inch. It looked like it was about to reach where those few people were. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that if he wanted to, he could directly take their lives now. Not only were Jin Lei and the others shocked, but the people who were fighting in the distance also noticed the commotion and looked over. It was fine if they did not look, but once they did, everyone's faces were filled with disbelief. In fact, even Elder Xu Feng and the others did not know how powerful Rongxiu was now. Hence, when they saw this scene, the shock in their hearts was no less than Jin Lei and the others. Wasn't Rongxiu fighting with them just now? How did he suddenly become so strong now? An elder could not help but murmur softly. Elder Xu Feng suppressed the surging waves in his heart. Isn't that obvious? It's obvious that he was hiding his strength. Although they did not know why Rongxiu had suddenly changed his mind and used his true strength, it was still a good thing for them. This round was a sure win. I admit defeat. When the space collapsed in front of him, Jin Lei finally gave up without hesitation. His face was tense, and the veins on his forehead were bulging. From this, it could be seen that although these words were spoken quickly, they were not done willingly. He wanted that treasure. After all, a king-grade origin tool was extremely rare in the Divine Ruins world. Even a first-rate family would crazily chase after it. But before that, he had to be alive. If he really died here today, then it would be like drawing water with a bamboo basket. In the end, it would all benefit others. Jin Lei had seen many big scenes. Although his temper was irritable and arrogant, he could still bend and stand tall at crucial moments. Rongxiu. As long as you stop now and let us go, I promise that the Golden Wings sect will never oppose the Yuntian Tower again. Jin Lei saw that the space in front of him was not slowing down, but the pressure on him was getting heavier. He could not help but swallow with difficulty and raise his voice again. I mean what I say. Rongxiu smiled. Oh. Really? Of course. I'm the sect master's direct disciple. In front of so many people, I will definitely do as I say. As Jin Lei spoke, he could already feel the pressure pressing down on him, causing his face to ache faintly. It was as if a sharp knife was constantly scraping his face. Rongxiu's eyebrows twitched slightly, and he seemed to be smiling. You should have said this earlier. Do you think you still have the right to bargain with me now? Jin Lei's face paled. He could see the killing intent in Rongxiu's eyes. Rongxiu really dared to kill him. Jin Lei was finally completely flustered. Rongxiu, I just want to snatch that treasure. I never had the intention to kill you. If you kill me here today, the Golden Wings sect will not let this matter rest. You want to use the Golden Wings sect to pressure me? Rong Xiu's tone was languid, and his expression was indifferent. If the sect master of the Golden Wings sect was here, I could still give him face. You. Who are you? His voice was calm, but it carried the most powerful killing intent. Jean Lei choked. Only then did he remember that although he was highly regarded by the sect master, he was not the person in charge of the Golden Wings sect. On the other hand, Rong Xiu, as the holy son of the Yuntian Tower, was on equal footing with their sect master. Rong Xiu seemed to feel that these words were not enough of a blow to Jean Lei. Besides, even if I'm willing to let you go, the academy will still be in charge. The academy may not be so. Causing trouble in Fangzhou City was the same as causing trouble in Lingshao College's territory. He originally wanted to end the battle quickly and snatch the treasure back. The sect master would definitely protect him for the sake of the treasure. But now, not only did he not get the treasure, he was also in a quagmire. His life and death were in the hands of the other party. You did it on purpose just now. He suddenly realized something and blurted it out. Rong Xiu had been besieged previously, but there were wins and losses, so the two sides were actually in a state of tug-of-war. They also thought that as long as they continued fighting, they would be able to snatch the treasure back from Rong Xiu. But now that they thought about it, Rong Xiu was just stalling for time. He gave them hope, thinking that the treasure was within their reach. In reality, he was just exhausting their strength and patience, waiting for the elders of Lingshao College to arrive. Now, he had turned the tables and gained the upper hand. Even if they wanted to leave, it would be difficult for them to escape the siege of so many elders. In an instant, Jean Lei's heart was filled with endless regret. It was all in the heat of the moment. If he had known, he would not have followed them. Rong Xiu smiled slightly, admitting it. You're easier to bait than expected. It must have been hard on the sect master of the Golden Wings sect to nurture you for so many years and entrust you with such an important task. In the end, he was just a brainless person. Jean Lei clenched his fists tightly, and countless thoughts flashed through his mind. His face gradually turned pale, and soon, he was covered in cold sweat. It's all his fault for encouraging us. Suddenly, a sharp reprimand came from the side. We wanted to compete fairly with you, but he urged us to join forces. He also urged us to chase after you. That's right. It's him. It's all the Golden Wings sect's fault. It has nothing to do with us. Rong Xiu. Elders. Every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. This debt should be on Jean Lei's head. In an instant, the other families turned against him, and the situation was reversed. Jean Lei was trembling with anger, and then he laughed bitterly. Good, good, good. Since all of you have said so, then I don't have to be polite with you. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly shouted in a low voice. The next moment, he actually forcibly broke free from Rong Xiu's god realm. In an instant, his skin and flesh ruptured. Blood dripped everywhere. He went straight for Chu Luyue on the other side. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1195. Jean Lei's outburst was extremely sudden. No one expected him to suddenly turn around and charge towards Chu Luyue while he was still begging for mercy. Moreover, he did it in such a decisive manner. Chu Luyue realized what he was going to do the moment he charged towards her. She moved her feet and quickly dodged backwards. Probably because she was surrounded by Rong Xiu's enchantment, although she was also in the divine realm, she was not affected at all and could still move freely. This also gave her a chance to shake off Jean Lei. However, Jean Lei was already a little crazy at this moment. He was on the verge of breaking down. When those people turned against him and pushed all the blame onto him, he knew that he was finished. The matter had already blown up. Lingshao College needed an explanation. These clans and sects needed to shirk their responsibilities. Even the sect leader of the Golden Wings sect would not be willing to go against the school and Yuntian Tower for him, who had not taken back anything. He knew that he would become a sacrifice for the balance of everything. The situation was set. He had no other choice. Therefore, in his madness, the only way he could think of to protect himself was to kidnap a student from Lingshao College. It did not matter who the student was or what her identity was. The important thing was that Lingshao College would definitely not give up on their student in front of so many people. They would definitely give in. These thoughts flashed through Jean Lei's mind in an instant. Therefore, he did not hesitate to make a move. Even if he forcefully broke free from Rongxiu's divine realm and was heavily injured. But at this moment, he was about to lose his life. Why would he care about that? Black Bone Leopard. He quickly closed in on Chu Luiyue as he shouted. He summoned his own contracted magical beast. To be more precise, it was a contracted magical beast. A vigorous black figure appeared in response to the call. It was a bun that was completely black. Only its eyes were dark green, like ghost fire. It made one's heart turn cold just by looking at it. Its speed was even faster than Jean Lei. In the blink of an eye, it was already behind Chu Luiyue. One man and one beast prepared to launch a pincer attack on Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue's eyes turned cold. Dumpling. Whoosh. The sound of wings flapping could be heard. A crimson-tailed red phoenix that was crimson all over appeared in everyone's line of sight. It flapped its wings and the flames on its body raged. Everywhere it passed, everything was burned to ashes. Seeing Dumpling, the black bone leopard hesitated for a moment, and a trace of panic flashed across its eyes. In the Divine Ruins world, there were quite a few types of divine beasts. But even if they were all divine beasts, there were still differences in strength. Among the divine beasts, there were two primordial divine beasts, the Great Void Phoenix Dragon and the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. Behind them were the divine beast clans that possessed the power of their bloodlines. Correspondingly, the stronger the bloodline power, the higher the status. Although the black bone leopard was also a divine beast, compared to Dumpling, who possessed the bloodline of the primordial divine beasts, it was still lacking. The reverence for the two primordial divine beasts' bloodlines that were buried deep in its bones and blood made the black bone leopard fearful, and it even faintly wanted to submit. With just this moment of hesitation, Dumpling had already taken the lead to attack. Boom! A ball of red fire flew out. It went straight for the black bone leopard. The black bone leopard hurriedly dodged, but a part of its tail was still burned. Dumpling directly swooped down. Its sharp claws clawed at the black bone leopard's eyes. The two divine beasts quickly engaged in a battle. Jean Lei's expression froze for a moment. He did not expect that such a young and tender youth would actually contract with such a level of divine beast. This Chu Yu might not be so easy to deal with. But at this moment, Jean Lei already had no other choice. So he did not stop his footsteps and continued to rush towards Chu Luiyue. At the same time, he used all his strength to withstand the terrifying pressure of the Rongxiu and forcefully raised his axe. Fiercely chopped down. Crack! A small crack appeared on the golden barrier. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched. She quickly retreated while circulating the force in her body. Bang! The barrier shattered. At this moment, the distance between the two of them was extremely close. Jean Lei raised the axe in his hand again and chopped down. The void shook. A tyrannical wave crazily attacked. The Rongxiu's expression turned fierce, and murderous intent surged in his eyes. However, at this moment, a burst of intense light suddenly erupted from Chu Liyue's hand. A ball of light shot up into the sky. It's that Emperor Divine Weapon. Suddenly, a cry of surprise came from the crowd. Chu Liyue's heart trembled. Emperor Divine Weapon. So this was what they wanted to snatch. Immediately after, Chu Liyue saw that wherever the ball of light passed, a faint glow would scatter. The Rongxiu's golden divine territory actually quietly dissipated. After seeing this clearly, Chu Liyue's heart tightened, and she suddenly felt that something was wrong. The aura of the Emperor Divine Weapon was actually stronger than the Rongxiu's divine territory. She looked up. The light on the ball of light was gradually becoming gentler. From here, she could vaguely see that there was something inside. Moreover, as the light flashed on the ball of light, the outline inside became clearer and clearer. More importantly, the aura on the ball of light was also crazily increasing. Chapter 1196. At this moment, Chu Liyue and Jin Lei were the closest to the venerable divine weapon. Who would be able to obtain it had become the focus of everyone's attention. When they saw Jin Lei directly throw his axe at Chu Liyue, the faces of the elders on the academy's side changed. Chu Yu. Elder Wan Zhang's heart sunk. That kid was only at the middle stage of rank 7. How could he be Jin Lei's match? If he was hit by this attack, he was afraid that the hearts of Elder Wenxi and the others were also hanging high in the air. At this moment, no one could make a move. Everything depended on Chu Yu. When Chu Liyue saw Jin Lei, she knew that he was a god-level expert. He was a god-level expert who had stepped into the god-level realm. His level was much higher than hers. Even she knew that if she were to face such a person head-on, she would only have death waiting for her. However, they were so close to each other, and no one could help her. She had to take this attack on her own. Looking at the ice-cold axe that was flying toward her rapidly, Chu Liyue did not hesitate at all and used her strongest combat ability. In an instant, a layer of golden armor covered her body. At the same time, a black shield stood in front of her. Jin Lei didn't think much of it and couldn't help but laugh. My axe is a high-level divine weapon, and it's extremely sharp. Do you think you can just take out a shabby shield and, clang? The two collided. He didn't manage to finish his sentence. His smug expression quickly turned into astonishment and disbelief. Because his axe was actually unable to split open the black shield. Instead, it was bounced back by the intense collision. Swoosh! He quickly dodged. The axe brushed past his face. He had actually cut off half of his ear. In an instant, he felt excruciating pain. His face was covered in blood. Coupled with his already pale face, he looked even more battered and exhausted. That was not all. A strong gust of wind swept past him, and at the same time, it slowed down his speed. The distance between him and Chu Liyue widened again. Jin Lei looked at Chu Liyue in shock and anger. He covered his ear with one hand and couldn't believe what had just happened. A young man who wasn't even 20 years old withstood his attack and even gained the upper hand. One had to know that in order to ensure that his attack would hit the target, he had used all of his strength. It was a great humiliation. What a joke. Then, the young man's face appeared from behind the black shield. His delicate and clean face was pale, and blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. He wasn't completely unaffected by the collision just now. However, in the end, he was still in one piece. Jin Lei couldn't describe how he felt. He looked at the black shield in Chu Liyue's hand. There was something wrong with that thing. Ever since he got the axe, he had been invincible. Invincible. No matter how tough something was, no matter how solid the barrier was, he could easily split it open with his axe. Isn't the barrier that Rongxiu set up like this? However, such a sharp axe was completely useless in front of the black shield. Jean Lei took a closer look and realized that there wasn't even a mark on it. This was definitely not an ordinary yuan instrument. Chu Luiyue sensed the madness in his eyes and immediately became alert. All the muscles in her body tensed up. Her opponent's power was much higher than hers. She almost couldn't take that blow. If she were to do it 2 more times, her arm would probably be crippled first. She made a prompt decision and continued to charge towards the thing above her. Dumpling! She let out a clear shout. A red figure quickly approached her. It was Dumpling, who had just finished off the black bone leopard. There were still a few pieces of flesh on its claws. It had been left behind when it had scratched the black bone leopard's face. Chu Luiyue leaped and jumped onto Dumpling's back. Whoosh! Dumpling flapped its wings and its speed suddenly increased. Jean Lei instinctively turned back to take a look. His contracted divine beast, the black bone leopard, was now beyond recognition. Its face and body were badly mutilated, and there were several red flames burning on its body. It was rolling around in pain, trying to extinguish the flames. However, how could the flames of the red-tailed phoenix be extinguished so easily? As if sensing Jean Lei's gaze, the black bone leopard raised its head and looked over. All the coldness and ruthlessness in its eyes had disappeared. Instead, it was full of desire and hope. Now, the only one who could help it was its master. However, Jean Lei forcibly retracted his gaze and chased after Chu Luiyue. At this time, he was already a clay bodhisattva crossing the river. He couldn't even protect himself, so how could he care about anything else? The black bone leopard was already crippled and couldn't help him. He could only give it up. Seeing Jean Lei's action, the black bone leopard's only intact eye moved, leaving only mournful despair. It howled. However, Jean Lei turned a deaf ear to it. He mobilized all his strength, hoping to snatch that venerable origin device before Chu Luiyue. However, imagination was beautiful, but reality was cruel. He soon realized that after the previous battle, he had used up more than half of his strength. He couldn't catch up to the red-tailed phoenix at all. The distance between the two sides was increasing. This made Jean Lei more and more anxious. If he was unable to seize this final opportunity, then he would probably have to stay here forever. After thinking about it, he gritted his teeth and made a bold decision. Since it was a dead end anyway, he might as well take a risk. Even if he really died, he could drag someone down with him. At this thought, a strange pattern suddenly appeared between his brows. That was the Golden Wing sect's totem. When the totem appeared, the origin power around his body began to boil. It began to rise at an abnormal speed. One of the elders suddenly exclaimed in surprise. "Oh no! He's burning his bloodline power." Of course, the disciples of the Golden Wing sect also had bloodline power. However, their bloodline power was different from that of ordinary aristocratic families. Most of them obtained the corresponding bloodline power through cultivation or other methods. And this was also an important condition for them to settle down in the sect. The stronger the bloodline power, the higher their status, and the greater their right to speak in the sect. At this moment, he activated the totem and burned the bloodline power he had accumulated with great difficulty. It was obvious that he was planning to fight to the death. Chu Yu was in danger. However, as soon as he said that, everyone saw that Rongxiu had already moved. He took a step forward with his long legs and quickly approached Jean Lei. His face was expressionless, as if covered with a layer of frost, cold to the bone. There was no doubt that he had already made up his mind to kill Jean Lei. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1197. Sensing the cold murderous intent behind him, Jean Lei turned around instinctively. After glancing at Rongxiu, he couldn't help but shiver, and a deep sense of fear rose from the bottom of his heart. Why did Rongxiu suddenly have such a strong murderous intent towards me? They had been fighting for so long, but Rongxiu's emotions were calm and indifferent. It was as if everything had nothing to do with him. Or perhaps, he did not care about those things at all. Even when Rongxiu attacked with all his might and suppressed all of them, he did not react at all. But now, he had suddenly become like this. Jean Lei really could not understand. The pressing time and the crisis of life and death made him unable to think carefully about this matter. The only thing he could do was to rush toward Chu Luiyue at an even faster speed. Either he could snatch that venerable 1 yuan instrument, or he could kidnap Chu Yu. Chu Luiyue flew upward with Dumpling. At this moment, the venerable 1 instrument had stopped and was quietly suspended in mid-air. It was still enveloped in a layer of faint light. From where Chu Luiyue was, she could barely see the outline of the object inside. It seemed like it was also a sword. The closer she got, the clearer she could feel the pressure coming from above. Chu Luiyue held her breath. The aura of this sword was several times stronger than the Dragon Abyss sword. The Dragon Abyss sword was personally forged by Taizu. It triggered 81 Tianlei and was considered a high-level divine instrument. Even in the Divine Ruins world, the Dragon Abyss sword was definitely a valuable treasure. After Chu Luiyue came to the academy, she realized that although Taizu was unable to break through to the High God realm and remained at the Demigod realm, he was extremely outstanding in the aspect of weapon forging. However, every time she asked about this, Taizu did not seem to be willing to talk about it. After a few times, Chu Luiyue did not ask anymore. The sword in front of her was a venerable 1 instrument. It was 2 whole levels higher than the Dragon Abyss sword. The degree of its tyranny was self-evident. Girl, this venerable artifact doesn't have an artifact soul. You can take it. Taizu's voice suddenly came from the bottom of his heart. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Artifact soul. That's something that only King Divine artifacts and above have. I'll explain it to you in detail in the future. All you need to do now is to snatch it. The Long Yuan sword was not bad, but compared to this, it was far inferior. Chu Luiyue pursed his lips when he heard Taizu being so excited. Taizu, please enlighten me. The Long Yuan sword has a sword spirit. Although it can't be compared to the sword spirit, with me around, I can lend a helping hand. You just have to find the right time to transfer the sword's soul to that sword. Such an opportunity could be said to be extremely rare. However, Chu Luiyue suddenly hesitated. But Taizu, this venerable 1 instrument belongs to the academy. It doesn't seem appropriate for me to take it for myself. According to what they had said, the academy had sent out many people and spent a lot of manpower and resources in order to retrieve this item. If she were to do that now, she would feel a little apologetic. Originally, this matter had nothing to do with her. She had only come here because she was worried about Rongxiu. During the crisis just now, Rongxiu had handed this item to her without hesitation so that she could take good care of it. But if she took the opportunity in the end to take it for herself, Taizu was stunned for a moment, then his voice became much calmer. You're right. I was a little impulsive. Just now, when he sensed that this venerable 1 instrument didn't have an artifact soul, he was too excited and didn't think too much. But after listening to Chu Luiyue's words, he thought carefully and felt that it made sense. Although this venerable 1 instrument is extremely rare, but just do as you think. Taizu comforted. It wasn't that he didn't have any regrets. Even he had only heard of the Honorable Master Divine Weapon in legends. Now that such a rare treasure was in front of her, Chu Luiyue chose to give it up. With her intelligence, she would know what this meant. You are the pride of the Shengguan family. Taizu sighed with emotion. With such a temperament, what would she have to worry about in the future? Chu Luiyue also smiled. Thank you, Taizu, for your praise. Then I'll take it back first. At this moment, Dumpling had already flown to the side of the light bowl. Chu Luiyue jumped down. She didn't know how it came out just now, so Chu Luiyue wanted to try to get it back into the Qian Kun ring. However, at this moment, the golden lightning suddenly approached. Die! In an instant, Chu Luiyue's hair stood on end. Countless experiences wandering on the edge of life and death had already forged her instincts. She turned around without any hesitation. Jean Lei's fist, which was burning with the power of bloodline, was already in front of her. Chu Luiyue raised her sword. The divine power in her dantian suddenly surged out. Boom! The long yuan sword suddenly exploded with a powerful aura. The golden lightning shocked Jean Lei. Divine power. Could this young man really be a god-level expert? He didn't have time to think too much and attacked with all his might. The reason why he dared to fight Chu Luiyue with his bare hands was that his fist was already covered with a layer of scales. Although he had yet to completely forge his own divine body, he had already finished forming this hand. In other words, the power of this punch was comparable to a real divine body. Therefore, Jean Lei was very confident. Clang! The long yuan sword and Jean Lei's fist collided. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1198. After a short moment of dead silence, an intense pain came from his hand. The expression on Jean Lei's face instantly froze. Chi! The sound of a sharp sword piercing through flesh was heard, making one's teeth ache. Jean Lei could even feel the sharp tip of the sword rubbing against his bones. A trace of panic finally appeared in his eyes, and he quickly retreated. But, how could it be so easy to come and go as one wished? Chu Luiyue stared at him coldly, her eyes sharp and cold. At the same time, she held the sword tightly and pushed forward again. Helpless, Jean Lei could only change his fist into a palm and forcefully grab the sword blade. Without any hesitation, another large piece of flesh was scraped off. Fresh blood kept dripping from his hand, flowing down the black blade of the long yuan sword. The intense pain caused his face to turn pale. The next moment, he clenched his teeth, grabbed the long yuan sword, and threw it out fiercely. Although Jean Lei was already at the end of his rope, he was still a god-level expert. A starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Chu Luiyue used her fastest speed to mobilize the godly power in her body and gave Jean Lei this blow. But in many aspects, she was still inferior to him. For example, Jean Lei, who was in a state of madness, threw Chu Luiyue out of balance in an instant. Her body was thrown to the side. A ray of golden light flew over quickly, and a gentle and strong force supported her, allowing Chu Luiyue to quickly stabilize her body. But at this moment, a soft sound of collision suddenly fell into her ears. Chu Luiyue instinctively turned her head to look. It turned out that after she was thrown out, the long yuan sword that she was holding had accidentally knocked into the ball of light beside her in the process of struggling. The tip of the sword had pierced into the ball of light by about an inch. That sound was produced when the tip of the long yuan sword came into contact with the sword inside. It was crisp, clean, and pleasing to the ear. Just by hearing it, one could tell that it was definitely a peerless sword. If it was any other time, Chu Luiyue would be very happy to hear this sound and see this treasure. It was even better to have a chance to observe it closely. But at this moment, her heart suddenly jumped. The words that Taizu said just now suddenly appeared in her mind. That venerable divine weapon did not have a soul. Chu Luiyue hurriedly tried to pull back the long yuan sword. But when she tried, she realized that the long yuan sword seemed to be sucked onto the sword. It was motionless. At the same time, she could clearly feel that something was gushing out from the long yuan sword and continuously entering the sword. As the long yuan sword's owner, Chu Luiyuan knew what it was. Sword soul. The accumulated energy within the long yuan sword began to frantically transfer. This time, Chu Luiyue was really shocked. She did not expect such a mistake. She increased her strength, wanting to take back the long yuan sword. But it was all in vain. The sword in the ball of light was extremely powerful. It was as if he was crazily plundering the long yuan sword. The others did not notice the situation on Chu Luiyue's side. Jean Lei saw that Chu Luiyue stood there motionless after barely managing to stand. He thought that she had been beaten silly and planned to follow up with another attack. However, as soon as he took a step forward, he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. He stiffened his neck and looked down. An extremely thin golden line swayed gently in midair. There was a drop of blood on it. It was dark red. Great panic surged in his heart. He turned his gaze and saw that half of his calf had been silently cut off. He didn't even hear the sound of his bones breaking because all of this had happened too quickly. The next moment, that half of his calf suddenly fell under his gaze. He raised his head in horror and saw that Rong Xiao was already not far away from him. It was only because he had focused all his attention on the battle with Chu Luiyue that he did not notice. Rong Xiao floated in the air, and his noble face looked as if it was covered in snow. His pair of deep eyes were like a 1,000-year-old lake, and one look was enough to freeze a person. That was a strong murderous intent. He had one hand behind his back and the other hand was wrapped around a golden line. It was the line that had cut off Jean Lei's calf. Jean Lei's face was pale and his cracked lips trembled. Rong Xiao's slender fingers moved slightly. The golden thread instantly transformed into countless sharp blades of light and flew toward the golden lightning. No, Jean Lei sensed danger and was about to beg for mercy when he felt a chill in his throat. A gush of warm blood suddenly spurted out. It was his throat that had been cut off. Jean Lei raised his hand in a panic and wanted to cover the wound on his throat. But halfway through, he realized that his hand had fallen off. Then, it was his forearm and upper arm. Piercing pain came from all over his body. He opened his mouth, but only the sound of the wind could be heard. He knew that his body was gradually disintegrating. He could even feel the blood in his body gushing out, and it was quickly cooling down. Jean Lei widened his eyes and stared fixedly at Rong Xiao. However, his eyeballs exploded the next moment. Annihilation, silent. Countless people were watching this hellish scene, their hearts and minds trembling. The so-called death by 1,000 cuts was nothing more than this. When they looked at Rong Xiao again, many people's state of mind changed. He used such a cruel method to kill him, but his expression was so calm and indifferent. This man was really too scary. But the next moment, they saw an even more shocking scene. The young man standing next to the light ball suddenly fainted. The moment he fell, Rong Xiao went to his side and picked him up by the waist. Digression: those who are fighting for the star of the monthly votes and star of the recommendation votes, please join the group as soon as possible to verify. Currently, the maximum number of monthly votes is 56 times 2. The star of the commentary vote is still pending. There are only 2 days left. Finally, the release time is October 13th at dawn. Raise the monthly votes. Countdown to release. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.